So we never joined with audio, so technically it's not actually
Okay.
part of the, yeah. Yeah. Test, test, test.
They started stamping the islands.
Yeah.
That's what they were doing yesterday. Oh, yeah?
You know, they outlined it. They didn't actually stamp
Oh,
it,
they
but
didn't?
they were outlining it to get it.
Yeah, because the one here at the top of Front Street is stamped.
Yeah, yeah.
I saw them up there too, actually.
Yeah, when they checked for these down by Montenegro Square, did they check the Santa house to make sure they didn't fall on the lake inside?
All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Planning Board meeting of Thursday, September 14th. I will be calling the meeting to order at 7:16 and reminding everyone that the meeting is being broadcast and recorded. This is a joint meeting with the Ashland Select Board as well, so I will hand it over to Rob to call their meeting to order.
I hereby call this meeting of the Ashland Select Board to order for September 14th, 2023.
All right, so I see Kate, one of our other members, is on remotely. So we will proceed to the second item on our agenda, which is the clerk's report. Kate? Kate, can you hear me? Do you want to give a report this evening? That doesn't look good.
I'm trying to get it. We turned it off a little.
Kate, are you able to hear us? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Were you able to hear the first part?
Just not anything clearly.
Okay.
Till just now.
Okay, we were playing with the volume a little bit. Do you want to do you have a clerk's report to give this evening?
Briefly, yes, we've received essentially 2 emails or related subjects, and maybe a couple of them multiple, since our last 8/24. Those have been responded to by the chair and town planner, so all correspondence received, the planning board is up to date with a response.
All right, great. Thank you, Kate. Next item on our agenda is public comment. So if any members of the audience make a public comment?
Hey, good evening, Steve Morgan, 136 Concord Street. I saw on your agenda, but not on the selectmen agenda, that there's a scenic road report today. I don't know if that's actually going to happen today, but I do have a comment on scenic roads. I understand that somehow the sustainability committee has become involved in scenic roads, and I just, as someone who lives on a scenic road, And I know there's been a history of things happening on the scenic road that are not supposed to happen on the scenic road. I would like to just provide the feedback that the planning board really should own the zoning and the scenic road, not the sustainability committee. Not sure what they're up to, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that they would be working on scenic roads, and given their repeated late minutes, I really have no idea what they're working on. So I would ask the planning board to own and take responsibility for scenic road. That's my comment for tonight.
All right, thank you. All right, seeing no other, well, there could be public comment from online. Just if you have a public comment online, please raise your hand. Oh, thank you.
With our second public comment, Mr. Mark Dissoni, can you please unmute yourself and state your name and address?
Hey, thank you. Good evening, Mark Sony, 49 Hawthorne Road. And I just wanted to ask a question before it actually got started, because on the agenda after your board and select board get to have your meeting, joint meeting, is the 4060 Main Street is withdrawing. Would that be fully explained why before the agenda items open?
We will be looking at that, at the 10 to 60 Main Street, when we get there. We're not going to address it at the time, but yeah, we, you know, Peter will explain that is being withdrawn. We don't have a lot of details at this time. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it sets me up with a mindset saying there is a reason for it, and Mr. Manchak's going to be saying what it is. And the other thing was, ever since you have public participation in the beginning of the meeting, it makes the rest of the meeting feel a little bit more going and understanding with how the meeting is going. But on still on some subjects, my only opinion is myself only, is that some of the discussions with the board takes way long to what the subject matter is. Is there a way of cutting down from about an hour of discussion to actually getting votes in sooner?
Well, we certainly try to be as efficient as we can. Do you have any other comments, Mark?
Yeah, but those are the two right there, and I just wanted to make these marathon meetings not to be a marathon that goes all the discussion on the board back and forth with the subject matter. Takes a bit of time and patience with the people watching, and not be able to comment and just sitting and just hearing on and on and on. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mark. Are there any other comments? All right, seeing none, and just for people that are more unfamiliar with our agenda, a lot of the items at the bottom, 7 and 8 in our agenda, are different types of reports and updates that we keep there, just so that we have a space in our agenda to receive an update about a project if there is one. Often there are no updates, but sometimes someone has had a committee meeting or there's a project update, and that gives us an opportunity to go through those. All right, so seeing no other hands raised, we'll go on to the first major item on our agenda, which is our joint meeting with the Select Board. And the first and most important item of the three that are listed is a discussion of the MBTA Communities Act. And for that, I'm really going to turn it over to Town Planner Peter Matchek, who has looked at this in depth and has a presentation prepared.
Thank you. So I'm just going to, everyone at the table has a PowerPoint. The slides were printed out. So it's a short 9-slide PowerPoint. And obviously this kind of was built from all the information that has been sent out from the state and from what's happened in other communities. And I do want to make note, I did send the link out to a pretty good website, pretty cool website, I thought, from the Mass Housing Partnership, which kind of showed scale, size, different projects throughout the state. There was a couple sample projects over in Sudbury, so just trying to make note of that. So with that said, I'm going to share my screen, so pardon the... Let's see if I can get this done. And so I think tonight, the major goal is this conversation is to kind of set the table for what is MBTA zoning and what we have to do in Ashland to kind of meet the criteria that the state rolled out. So this is going to be the first of many conversations I think we're going to have, but I think it's important just to kind of get the ball moving and to, you know, make sure that we're all pulling in the same direction, and understand what we have to do. So just a quick run through the slides is that within pretty much, I'm sorry. I'm jumping ahead. Oh, I apologize. It's always fun to do a PowerPoint with the Zoom stuff and everywhere too. Okay, I'm sorry. So MBTA community. So the MBTA community is part of a Charlie Baker, our former governor, put together economic development bill. Everyone understands, and I think here is that the state of Massachusetts, Metro Boston, has a housing crunch, housing shortfall, and so the MBTA communities is asking cities and towns to develop by right housing units to help in this quote-unquote housing shortfall crisis that the state finds itself in today. So within Metro Boston, there are 14 cities and towns which are considered MBTA service communities. These service communities are the real core Boston cities, such as Boston, Quincy, Weymouth. These are 14 cities that have access to the red line, the green line, the orange line. Then Ashland is one of the 51 cities and towns which are considered a host community. We host the MBTA station down Pleasant Street, and so therefore that is the category that we fall into. With that, we are one of the 51 cities and towns that are asked to plan for 15% of our total housing stock. That's going to be a key number that comes back up into play a little bit later, 15%. Additionally, you can kind of see by this map that you can kind of see where the lines are. Obviously, we are on the Worcester line here. You can see northerly, the Fitchburg line runs out, northeast. Then the Lowell line runs directly north of Boston, with the Gloucester line running up to the North Shore. Then obviously the Greenbush line and the other various South Shore lines going to the south of the city. And so here's a closer a map that kind of displays where Ashland is. Obviously, Ashland's right here. Framingham and Southborough are considered quote-unquote commuter rail cities. They are one of the other 51 communities. And then Hopkinton and Holliston, they're an adjacent, with Sherborne being a adjacent small town. That small town, small versus large towns, are usually, if you have less than a population number of X. I think in the state's case for this, it is 7,500. So Sherborne's population, I don't know it off the top of my head, but I'm assuming it's below a certain threshold, and so that's why it falls into that category. So a quick overview and the points that we need to really kind of set from the ground rules is that the state of Massachusetts within the legislation says that we have to have an area of reasonable size, quote unquote. That reasonable size is 50 acres of land. So we have to zone a minimum of 50 acres of land. And that 50 and so that's another key number, 50 acres. And those 50 acres have to be within a half a mile of, 40% of those 50 acres have to be in a half mile of a radius of the train station. Fun fact, there's 407 square acres within a quarter-mile radius, just from a mathematical standpoint. So as you're talking about size, as we see the next map, think of that number. So within the zoning, this has to allow multifamily housing by right, no special permits. Number two, this zoning cannot have any age restrictions, right? And it has to be suitable for families and children to live in. And so that is another key element. And then we kind of went over the 50-acre minimum. Another key couple points here is that from a baseline standpoint, the zoning has to have a minimum of 15 units per acre. And so 15 units per acre is the minimum density that we're zoning for. And then the second key point here is 40% of the acreage has to be within that half-mile district. This is the Ashland zoning map. Obviously, you see the yellow, which takes up probably, I would say, 75-80% of town. That's residential A. However, the train station, which is located right where my cursor is, you can see that the radius was built from the location of the train station.
Here's a quick question, because the radius seems to be in two parts. I was asking a question, that the radius seems to be in two parts, almost two bubbles, and is that because it's?
That's because we measure the radius from the outside property lines of the train station. So it's not a key point, you're not measuring the radius from a single point. When you build out the radius, you're building it out from the property lines of the MBTA station. And everyone knows it's a very linear parking lot, and so that's why you have that kind of, that rectangle, not rectangle, that buffer. Just a note, obviously, here, this is Memorial Drive, in the light blue, that is RTD, obviously the RTD district, that's where Cirrus Drive is currently located. That is where Arbella at Ashland, the 40B permitted in 2021, is located. Also, furthermore, on the, excuse me, what am I doing? I feel like I haven't done a PowerPoint in a long time.
Peter, while you're doing that, can I ask a question?
Of
with
course.
respect to that? Because
Yep.
that piece of property we were just talking about, Arbella, that has an age restriction.
Correct.
So that wouldn't be applied to the figures that,
Well, let's talk about that, right?
okay.
The zoning, the underlying zoning does not have an age restriction, right? For that parcel, I believe. But the property and the project that was proposed and approved by the town of Ashland does have an age restriction. So that's one of those questions that I still have to get some clarification on from the state of how that would all work out. But the zoning per se, I do not believe has an age restriction on it. The project as proposed and permitted, it does. It was a 62-plus property.
And Peter, just to clarify, I thought the state was saying zoning has to be there, even if there's a standing project, in theory, a new developer could come in and put in something that's not age restricted. So.
Correct.
Do
And
we
this is
really-
the thing, this is the major point of the MBTA communities, not to jump ahead. But we're really doing, this is a zoning exercise. We're all gonna think of Cirrus, right? We're all gonna think of, okay, how many units is Cirrus? Cirrus is 398 units, and it's upon 28 acres of land. Has a density of 13 units per acre, right? So that's what we gotta think about. 13 units, we gotta be a baseline at 15%, right? But that's great, that project is already built on those 28 acres. But to your point, Deanna, is that it's not about what's built there, right? It's about what's allowed to be built there by right? That's what the state's interested in. The zoning exercise, the calculations of what could be built, what is that, what's the possibility? And there's also, there's all sorts of different things that a site has to, you have to develop along with housing for that site, and you have to account for within a development process. But at this point, and for this zoning exercise to be an MBTA community, it's about densities, acreage, and uses, by right uses. So that's where it kind of come down to. This area in purple is is known as ADDA. It's part of the Ashland Downtown Overlay District. This is the Ashland Downtown Overlay District that the planning board rezoned and did a zoning update on back in, I think, 2021. And this would include 10 to 60 Main Street right here, and that is outside of the 0.5 mile. But just to give everyone a kind of from a geographical standpoint, this entire swath of the southern side of Pleasant Street was considered ADDA. And I believe there's 22 acres of land within ADDA that is within the quarter mile, with a half a mile radius. So I've already started to do some of these calculations, throughout, but it's just it's a long process. It's going to be, an exercise.
So quick question, just to go back really quick. Sorry, I don't mean to make it
No.
pop back, but so the purple that currently says industrial is actually ADDA?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
So see the hatch lines, the black hatch lines?
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So that is a representation of ADDA.
I couldn't see that either, so thank you for pointing.
So Pleasant
that.
Street,
Okay.
the southern side of Pleasant Street is zoned industrial all the way down.
Mm-hmm.
But when the town adopted at the downtown Ashland overlay district, that kind of embraced the use of form-based code. And I think that goes back to the late 2000s. I know Mark DeSoni worked really hard on, incorporating that, into the Ashland bylaws. Instead of rezoning, instead of changing the underlying zoning district, which was industrial, what the town decided to do was to create an overlay district for ADDA. ADDB and ADDC, just to make things more confusing, as zoning sometimes is actually a base zone. So ADDB and C are zoning, it's not an overlay district. ADDA is an overlay district, and it's really over the industrial zones in town.
So if we would need to change the zoning based on MBTA communities, would we be changing the base zoning, or would it be an overlay?
So if we are making if we're changing or if we're manipulating, if we are manipulating ADDA, we are making changes to a overlay district. If we manipulate and or make changes to anything within the RTD district per se, we are changing base zoning. So there is a little bit of a difference.
Okay,
But both of those are allowed?
Both of them are allowed.
okay.
And
Both
Peter,
are allowed.
can you clarify the blue is RTDA?
Yes.
And is that 50 acres?
No, RTDA is much bigger than 50 acres.
So, and is it more than 40% of it is in the half-mile radius?
I would say all of it is within the half-mile radius.
Do we have by right multifamily in that district?
No, changes have to be made. We have to make, at the end, one takeaway is, none of our zoning districts currently meet the MBTA zoning regulations or legislation. We're gonna have to make change to meet MBTA. If the town and the boards decide, yes, we need to meet MBTA zoning legislation, there has to be zoning changes presented.
But just to figure out the size, it looks like RTDA and RTDD are both meeting the initial two steps, 50 acres or more.
Correct.
Within the more than 40% of each is within the 0.5. So for those two, the only change we would need is by right 15 units per acre.
Correct. Yep.
So is that RTDA or RTDE? Looks like the legend is showing E.
I think
A and D. A is the blue.
The A.
A is the
blue
light.
different, the lesser extent, but
Can I have a follow-up question?
So where Cirrus is, where my cursor is, deeper is correct. That's ADDE.
Oh, that's E, not A?
I,
At least the legend shows that it's E. So that is that.
Oh, gotcha, so that's E.
Okay. Is the purple with the stripe, which might not come across.
Is that purple? She's
Yeah,
saying this
it's-
is E.
Yeah,
this one.
This is ADDA.
That's A.
You can see it
Gotcha.
better up there.
But which one is RTD? Which one is this one where Sirius is?
That's E.
That's E?
Yep.
Okay.
yep.
Yeah, but isn't, so just a question. You're saying we just have to create the zoning and make it by right,
Correct.
right? But we have to be careful about making the zoning and making it by right, because at some point, someone could then decide to build there, right, or not?
Yes.
Correct. Well,
Or they've already built there.
I was just gonna say, you only have a few slides.
yeah, I have a
Should
few more slides. Let me
Okay,
just
go ahead.
finish up. There's a little bit more other elements, right? We have to kind of put into the pot of soup here on
Yeah,
this one.
exactly. Let's make it harder.
Yeah. A couple examples of density in Ashland, I just stated Cirrus, obviously 398 units, 28 acres, the density 13.99. So that's kind of a good baseline to think about. 501 Pond Street, you can, see the slides, but that is gonna be built at a density of 29 units per acre. Village of the Americas, if you're just looking at 100 Chestnut Street, which is under the construction right now on the street, you're looking at a unit density of 28 units per acre. If you calculate the entire Village of the Americas site, which would be the units in the back, the quadplexes, and 100 to 130 Chestnut, that density level drops to, 7.2%. And so there is mathematically, there is differences when you start calculating this stuff. 10 to 60 Main Street, it was proposing, this project PowerPoint was was using that development, but that was being proposed at 23 units per acre. Couple other things here, and this is kind of approaches that this is kind of when it gets a little bit more interesting. So the state of Massachusetts says the town of Ashland and 51 other communities are host MBTA communities. So therefore, we have to plan for 15% of our housing stock, right? It was estimated that the town of Ashland has 7,495 housing units, doorknobs, within the 2020 census, right? With that, 15% is 1,124 units. So now we have to zone for 1,124, right? At the low end, we need to have a minimum of 50 acres, and we have to have a baseline of 15 units per acre, right? So if we zone 15, if we decide, the town decides, we like the density of 15 units per acre. In actuality, we have to zone 75 acres of land to meet the state's percentile at 15%. So these are kind of sliding scales. What's right for the town of Ashland? On the other side of it, right, if we say, we'll take 23 acres of land, we like 20, we just want to condense this into 50 acres, the minimum acreage. We actually have to zone for 23 units per acre by right. And so that's a decision that the planning board and the select board and the community are going to have to make if we decide to meet MBTA zoning regulations. Is it going to be 50 acres at the 23 unit level, per acre level, or is it going to be 15 units per acre in zone 75 acres?
Could we also just have a 70 or 100 acre size? And
No.
therefore less density, or we have to have either 50
So
or
the
50?
minimum density has to be 15 units per acre.
But you can mix and match.
You can mix and match.
So you could have like a 70 acre district and therefore end up with less density.
Not less than 15.
Not less than 15,
Not
but
less than
less than
15.
23.
You could.
That's what I mean.
Yep.
So
You
like-
could have you could have a zoning area that says, okay, if we're gonna do, and I haven't done the math to ramble this off, but if you say, okay, I don't like 23, but I don't like 15, okay, I'm gonna do 20, right? That means your acreage that you have to rezone is gonna be somewhere between 50 and 75. So call it 62, right? Just for quick math. But those are the numbers, that's what we have to meet, right? So we have to have a zone no less than 50 acres, and we have to have a density of no less than 15 units per acre. And we have to zone for 1,124 units. And so with that, and then 40% of the acres that we zone have to be within that half-mile radius.
So can we use an actual district like RTDE as an example? Like, what's its size? RTDE. Do we know what the size of that one is right now?
It's greater than 50 acres.
Is it like 70, 100? Like
I think
if
it's
we,
around
It's 94 is what I
94.
saw in the last.
Yeah.
so like
your
if
last
we
app.
rezone that one, what would be our density? Obviously above 15, but what would we get to? Like if we rezoned the whole 94 acres for RTDE,
So
as an
nine,
example.
it'd be 94 times 15,
Sorry,
I
have a
don't-
calculator.
so.
And does all this have to be newly
So we would
created
meet the
zoning,
requirement.
So,
right? Or could we, so 40% has to be around the MBTA train station?
correct.
But some of it could be other places, right? So Chestnut Street
Correct.
could that, even though it's already been permitted in his building, but it's
Mm-hmm.
the correct, it has a higher density, could that acreage be counted to what we need to create?
Yes, it can.
Okay,
So the only caveat when you do this, right, was so when you start breaking zones up, right?
Yep.
That no zone can be less than 5 acres. So per se, I believe the Chestnut Street project is 6 acres, right? So yes, you could add those 6 acres and
Okay.
rezone it. And then you could count those 6 acres into your total acreage.
okay.
And
But you would
can
still
co-
need 40% of something to be inside,
So
no?
40% of your total acreage
Has
and
to
your
be-
total unit count
Have to
has
be-
to be within that half a
Right,
mile
no,
radius.
I understand that,
But
but,
you are correct.
but the thing that I'm getting at is,
That could be part of the 60, which could
Right.
be outside.
okay, because I know early on, that was not considered, right?
Correct.
The initial stuff that was like, nope, it has to be within your half mile,
Correct.
and many communities had a problem with that. So
Many communities
knowing that now only has to be 40% in that half mile, I think from our perspective, that could be a benefit for us,
Correct.
especially with Pond Street and Chestnut Street.
So anywhere
And the
within the
zoning
town
density.
boundaries, is that right?
Yep.
So,
Correct.
Oh.
And you could, anywhere within the town boundaries,
Some
and from what I
flexibility.
understand through the
Yep.
regulations, it also has a place that makes sense, right?
Right.
That it's along a major transportation route, that, that there's access to, that it's a site that can be supported with infrastructure. And so that is just something to make note of. Just to kind of carry the conversation a little bit, obviously cities and towns, the inner core cities that have subway access, they already had to adopt zoning. I think it's by this upcoming Christmas, they have to, or end of the calendar year. The town of Ashland, in the 51 other communities, we do have to, to comply, we would have to adopt zoning by December 31st of 2024. So from this calendar year, we have another 12 months.
And which town meeting would that need to be? Spring?
So we would have an annual at the spring, but also, we would also have a special in the fall.
So we would,
It could be as late as the fall, special.
Could be as late as the fall. And I think a lot of towns are in our position. We're saying, okay, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna get there? What's the approach gonna be? And, wheels are starting to move. And so there are a lot of funding opportunities throughout the state. People are starting to do a lot of work on it. Obviously, we're doing the comp plan, and that's started up too. So we have a lot of planning exercises already rolling. And so, but I think tonight is just to set a baseline, start thinking about it. It's gonna be more and more in the newspapers, on the news. A lot of cities and towns through the Mass Municipal Association will be talking about it. And so it's just a conversation starter.
And I think this was, I'm looking at my own notes, and I think this information was in one of the memos maybe that Peter had online. But if we take that, and I'm not saying that we should do this, but just again as a reference, that if we take, Peter had pulled out 3 zones that we have and are really, really close to meeting these. So if we pull out ADDA, which is 22 acres and only needs an upping of the density, if we pull out ADDC, which is 2 acres and needs multifamily by right instead of special permit, and if we pull out a RTDE, which is Cirrus, which is 28.44 acres, that's our 50 acres, and they're all within the 0.5. But that would need to allow for, 2-bedroom, or no, for the 2-bedroom must be removed, right, in that zone.
Yep.
So in other words, it's like it's already there, but I think what we have to consider partly is that, okay, do we want ADDA to be by right? That's all of that side of Pleasant Street next to the train station. Do we want all of that to be, by right 15 units and that kind of density? That's a choice.
Tricia, would
something we
that
wanna
get
think
to
about.
would that get to the 1124 units, or was that?
That was, I think that was with all the acreage we need.
That's the acreage.
Acreage, so
Yeah.
there'd be presumably more to get to the 1124.
That's true.
Well, so the
That's true.
acreage is there, so you just have to make that by right at 23 units per acre.
Well, that's the question, I think.
Well, I think
Yeah.
that's one of the questions, right? Or
No,
we
it's
can-
valid, yeah.
Or we can take actual, we can take a RTDE or RTDD, which are already over 50 acres, and not in downtown, which has a lot of historic significance, and do density where it's already happening, like near Cirrus. I think we need to give the public some options as quickly as possible. My number one concern is compliance. I think the town of Ashland needs to make this quick and easy, accessible to the public, and give the public some real options, like, hey, we could do one of these 5 things. We, the select board and planning board, are thinking one of these 5. We want to hear public's input and move this pretty quick.
I think just to add one other thing in, on RTDE, which seems to be 94 acres, now that's already where the cap is, right? The Nyanza cap. There's some areas of that are unbuildable. So even though it seems 94 acres in that zone, it's not all available. I'm not sure
Is
how
that
much
still
is.
eligible? How does that work?
I don't believe it is, to tell you the
Well, that
truth.
makes sense.
There's because
We don't even have 50 eligible?
there could be some of it eligible to really cut up, to really take a cookie cutter and really dice it up, or maybe it's bad terminology. But to really kind of go in and take a look at it. There is a housing restriction, obviously, on that cap, for a good reason.
Sure.
And so, is that
So-
eligible? No.
Okay.
And
You don't
So
think they'll
let me-
find it eligible?
correct.
So let me ask a question. So Cirrus is a little over 28 acres.
Mm-hmm.
We have UGC, which is, I can't remember the acreage of that parcel that they're planning to build, which is already slated for what, it's 180 units?
It's
if that-
180 units of
if it goes
restricted.
through. Yes.
If
But I mean,
litigation.
if we removed the age restriction, and, we think about the units for UGC, which is already kind of planned for, the units at Cirrus, what else is going in at RTDE?
But we don't need to worry about
No,
what's
no,
going
no,
in
I'm
at
just saying,
all.
because I think part of it is what is the impact to the community? So I think kind of framing it out as saying, okay, so we have one Cirrus Apartments built, we have another development that's already permitted, we have the YMCA, which even though we're going to put an overlay, we're going to change the zoning, that's going to be the YMCA. We have part of that parcel, which is town-owned, which will be we'll get it in the exchange with the UGC.
Yeah, right.
16 acres.
Yep. So I'm just thinking, could we potentially make it, to Anna's point, easy and simple, do RTDE, and basically say to the community, this has already sort of been, we're changing the zoning, but the impact to the town is kind of smaller? Because I think that is sort of the goal, is to really control how this works. Because to your point, Pete, or Tricia, about Pleasant Street, do we want to rezone ADDA and potentially open that up to a lot of extra development in that area, because there's a lot of older homes on Pleasant Street. There's part of it's industrial that I'm sure people would love to be able to build on. So I'm just thinking like through, because the other part of it is this does need to go through town meeting. So even when we do the public outreach and we talk about this, at the end of the day, it will be a town meeting vote. And I don't know what happens, Pete, if we get to that point, we put it to town meeting and town meeting doesn't approve it.
I think we just need a easy majority, right, for this?
I think it goes through an easy majority. It doesn't have to qualify for the supermajority zoning change.
Yeah, it's super easy
there's
majority.
It could still fail.
Yeah, it could fail.
I mean,
So-
as
I think
someone,
I'd like to make just a point about that, and I did to the planning board when it first came up, but I absolutely, if we were going forward to comply, want to make sure we target spring town meeting. I don't think it's a good thing to end up the first time it's voted on fall town meeting, because it feels like it's putting in front of the public like you have to pass this. And we're smarter than that, better than that. It can go to spring. There could be tweaks, and you have another meeting to recover. I think, to be honest, with the conversation, this is the second time the planning board has had similar things, that we know there's a relatively simple way to comply that in theory will have very low impact. And that seems like the first pass, what we should be focusing on. We should get all the acreage and take the cap out of it, take the town-owned land out of it, and really see what we're dealing with, and make a work plan to target spring town meeting.
Yeah, I agree about the spring town meeting. Peter and I were talking about this earlier in the week, and I think, we want to have two bites of the apple. If things don't go well, or if we get some feedback that we didn't anticipate, I agree that spring is more work for us right now up front, but it's the smarter choice.
can I add that, like, as controversial as this is across the state, I do think it's important to remember that it's the MBTA mandate, meaning it's linked to transportation. And we do have two areas in our community right now that are linked to transportation. Where I live, Pond Street, that area, and obviously we have our train station that many people use. I prefer to take the train from West Natick, but occasionally I go to Ashland. So to me, it seems very consistent and easy for the public to understand that to meet this mandate, those are the two primary areas we should be thinking about, because both of them relate to public transport and access in communities, commuting to work, if you will. Those are primary routes, if you will, for people to get into Boston. I see the traffic all the time, and those are the areas we should be zoning for density. That's what the state is thinking about. That is the intention of this law, not to change our downtown historic properties.
What's the other area you were talking about?
Where I live, near 126, right behind Shaw's is where I live, but I'm very open and understanding that the state has the intention to dense my area, because we are on a major road that people utilize, including me, to transport ourselves to Boston. And so what I'm suggesting is the intent of the state of Massachusetts is not to take our downtown, the vibrant historic areas of Ashland, and make those dense. The intention of the MBTA transportation-related mandate is to give us transportation to Boston. That is the intention of this. So let's make that happen rather than adding the controversy of our downtown historic area.
I think to add to that, I'm sorry, Ann, to add to that, I would think that the state would allow to expand that 0.5 mile radius for that to happen, because 0.5 miles is right in the heart of downtown Ashland.
No, the downtown is...
It's just short of it.
Well, it's 0.2 of a mile from it.
Yeah.
But we don't need to even touch it. We can meet the requirement without touching downtown.
Okay, within that 0.5 radius.
I mean, Peter can
right?
speak to
Is
that.
right,
It
Peter?
sounds like we've...
Oh, no, I saw the map, but on that map, there's also the Nyanza campsite. If they're talking about age restriction locations, then that location, UGC, is a restricted location. I don't know if they plan on changing their thought process on their building design. I mean, so there's a lot of unknowns that we're gonna have to deal with. You shake your head no, but I see that. You're gonna tell the folks at UGC, no, you gotta change your design, it can't be age restricted?
But it's a
Oh,
zoning,
no.
Joe.
No, it's zoning. No one has to
We
change
can-
anything.
They don't have to change what they're doing. We can just say that the zoning now is 15 units per acre.
Per acre, okay, so
And-
just the
and-
acreage
and
and the
bu-
units
and that's
per
what they can
acres,
do
that's all
by
we're
right.
looking at.
And,
Not what they
and
could put in.
unage
Just
restricted.
a paper
change.
mandate,
Yeah.
paper
Yeah.
mandate.
All right.
So if something is zoned age restricted right now, and we, not rezoned, if something is being built age restricted right now,
Yeah.
if we rezone that area to be not age restricted, 10 years from now, that developer could sell that age restricted property to a developer who could say, oh, great, I have no age
So it's
restrictions.
just on the paper.
It's just paper.
So, just to, I guess, to think about where we are procedurally. So, the purpose of this meeting was, I guess, one was to get a briefing and talk about moving forward. But the other was, I think we had talked in the past about whether we want to comply, or if we have issues, or if there's other things we want to do. It sounds like, I'm hearing that compliance is possible. We need to look at some models, but I just want to look at the board, because we talked in the past about issues with the act itself and, our approach to it. How are people kind of thinking about that? I had one question about, I think the one, unfairness in this is that 1124 units, it's based on the fact that we have a lot of housing, so therefore we have to build more.
Well, we
So-
don't have to build, just zone enough.
Or zone enough, right.
Zone enough
But
that,
that's their rationale. And so the only thing, I'm just wondering, is there any, there's been some tweaking and adjustments to this. Is there anything about that going on, the 15% of 2020 housing? Has anyone heard anything about that?
I have not. I personally think that's pretty much, that's
Set in stone.
That's baked. That's done. I think there has, and I've signed up to go to a webinar because the state has changed a couple items regarding mixed use. There was some pushback from a lot of communities regarding
Right,
mixed
yeah.
use. How is mixed use, especially in the downtown areas where communities are obviously trying to support commerce, and obviously housing supports commerce, but you need a measurement of both, right? To create a viable and a vibrant downtown. So I know there was a lot of pushback across the state about how are mixed use commercial or the residential counted. And there's a seminar on that, I believe, in some time in next week or the week after.
I think there's also still a discussion about allowing part of it to be affordable.
So
Oh, right.
It's not, they're still talking about, can we, you have to do this density by right, but some of it can be affordable.
So
And
my
that's still
unders-
being discussed, or at
it's
least
still
that's
being
the-
discussed, and I think from my takeaway is when I go to these, when I listen in and I obviously take part in these seminars, webinars, are the state is allowing 10%. So they're saying 10% can be mandatory affordable housing, which matches up with obviously Chapter 40B legislation, any communities typically inclusionary zoning bylaw. So 10% is getting the go ahead. Anything above and beyond, I think that's where the question marks are going to be. So I think we can definitely lean on and build in 10% of all units shall be affordable.
Which means Chestnut Street could work and Pond Street could work.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
What's the implication of that, doing it or not doing? Does that change the number of units built, or how does that?
No, so I think we're just saying mandatory, if you're gonna go through this development process, that 10% of the units are being
So we
included.
could mandate it, should we choose to, but it's not
Should we
gonna
choose to,
change.
we could mandate that that there's 10% are built affordable. And so therefore, as a unit per se, say for example, is 200 units that come in, right? 20%, 20 units are therefore affordable. So then at the next go around I can't believe I'm saying this, at the 2030 census. At the 2030 census, when those 200 units are added on to the SHI count, the 20 units that are gonna be built with that development are going to create no negative impact on that community's percentile.
Yeah, okay.
So just back to Rob's question about comply or not to comply, my understanding is that communities that decide not to comply with MBTA communities are no longer eligible for state grants. Is that correct? And then also,
transportation-related state grants,
or
not any state.
I thought it
funding.
was everything through like mass development and
I think, I have not seen a full list of what you're gonna be getting and what you're not gonna get. Like, I'm sure all communities are gonna get their Chapter 90 funds, and they're
It's
gonna
not
get
like
their
you're going to
local
lose
aid.
school funding, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
You're not gonna lose school funding or road money. What you will lose
Grants,
is
though. Grants are separate from like
grants.
Chapter
And-
70,
And when I say
Chapter
grants,
90,
I say,
yeah.
you know,
It's a big one, we got the the one for downtown.
Downtown.
MassWorks.
a MassWorks grant can be millions and millions of dollars, right? And so the town of Ashland fought very long and hard and was granted a very large sum of money through Mass grants.
But I mean, with all due respect, it seems like we as a community probably have an easier time meeting this requirement than many other communities,
I'm sure
because
we
we've
do, yeah.
already moved towards density in key areas. And so for me, it's like a no-brainer. We are
Yeah.
exactly the kind of community that is a target because we're an MBTA community. As somebody who uses the MBTA and drives to work, it's an easy sell, I think, to the public, because that is why people are moving here. They're moving here to quickly commute to Boston. They're working in the greater Boston area.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're going to have a problem convincing the public that this is an easy solve for us, because we already have it. I think the
Right.
question we have to decide here is, do we have consensus as to whether we want downtown to be part of this or not? If we can reach consensus tonight, then we have 6 months to town meeting. And if we have some consensus, we can start talking about resources of how is Peter's office going to pull this off? Is it a matter of pulling the bylaw for 2 or 3 areas of town and changing a few words, making it by right, density? Or do we need to hire a technical consultant, which the state can pay for, to get this
Would
done
they
and
pay for it?
drafted and hold
Interesting.
public meetings? And so the quicker I think we can reach consensus on the downtown, that seems to be the big item for debate.
I think just it's a little bit more complicated than that, and I worry about trying to get consensus in the next 10 minutes or something in this meeting. But only because when we look at the ADD map up there, I agree with like, I don't know, was Claudia, someone mentioned the historic houses, maybe Brandy in that area. And yeah, so maybe we wouldn't want that part of our downtown to be included, but there is also this whole.
That's the north side.
Yeah, where it is all industrial,
The
not
south
just, not
side,
just
the south side is the
yeah,
industrial
not
commercial.
not just
Like the purple
yeah,
stuff?
Yeah, before you hit
Before
the
you hit
road.
the downtown.
Yeah.
So.
So
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I would have
Yeah.
consensus on that.
Yeah,
I
so it's
personally
like-
don't have problem touching industrial zones, as long as we're not touching downtown as people
Yeah, I'm not
drive
sure.
through downtown.
What's the issue
Ashland.
with downtown?
I don't think we need to, like, go that far,
Well,
honestly. Like, I don't
there've
think we
been
need
talk
to.
of going to Main
Oh.
Street. So that if the
Well, we
Main
had,
Street
at one
project,
time, we had talked about that would be useful to include 1050, 1060 Main Street, but it sounds like,
It's not within the
It's-
.5.
It's
Right.
outside the
It's
point
outside
five,
by
but it's,
2
Right.
but
But it
60%.
can be outside.
60%
But it
can be
could be-
outside of the
It
point.
can be
Yeah.
outside of the
So-
.5.
Yeah, but now it is, because
Yeah.
they made that change, they added that.
so
made
I'm
that
looking
change.
at, so I'm just looking at the rest of the board. I mean, I think it would be helpful, at least to me, I think we sound like we're gonna be moving forward, but I think it would be helpful to see different scenarios of how to achieve this, and then that could be the basis of how we move forward, and that would be something I think Peter would put together, to look at these different ideas, like here's one way, here's another way, and then we could visualize potentially what it could be like, because I think we need to think about that, of course.
I think that's fair, but we should give Peter some guidance. Like, I, for one, would like to see an option where it's the Pond Street area where I live, plus the Cirrus area that is the
That sounds-
RTDE.
sure.
That, to me, is my personal preference. I understand that we could also go towards the industrial area and towards downtown. I could live with that if that is the ultimate agreement or consensus of the majority in this room, but I would prefer to stay away from downtown.
I
me
think the south
personally.
side of Pleasant Street, I'm thinking, where all those, like the churches, Burnham's, all that whole stretch going down to, that all looks to me like a good area to be zoned this way. But
yeah, and my
that's just me.
And my
But-
mentioning that wasn't saying, yeah, we should take away all those businesses, because that's not what I'm
No,
saying at all.
right.
No, it's just a matter of zoning it.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
matter of looking at the zoning and looking at where we are, however many years into the future, to look at everything.
Right.
So, I mean, would it be best to kind of create a mini working group, that even if there's just one member of the select board and one member of the planning board, and working with Peter and I assume Michael, I don't know, on the select board side.
Yeah, I think
But to-
Alvaro and myself would be the ones kind
Yeah.
of working on.
What do you guys
Yeah,
think?
but also to be the
Well, 'cause
liaison to bring things back to our boards.
I think that makes sense to make a small working group, one from us, one from planning board with Peter, and I don't, Michael, I think toward the end might be good, but I don't know that he's not gonna be doing the work for the GIS and stuff like that. The other thing I would say is, let's also consider, if we're looking at Pond Street, also look at the parcel on Chestnut Street. Because as you look at the area around the train station, yes, it just has to be zoned a certain way. But for me, part of this is, if it's gonna be zoned that way, we need to at least have some possibility that in the future, if the housing is needed, it could be built there. And there are certain areas around on Memorial Drive that we don't wanna build on. So by making it by right zoning, to me, that seems disingenuous, right? But if we can, because we can include Chestnut Street, right? We can make that, just the section that has the parcel of 100 Chestnut Street that's already
We
gonna
can
meet
make a
the-
little morsel of 5 acres. or-
Right.
Yeah.
Right, same
Or
with,
at least
Pond
5.
Street and stuff like that. So ideally, you want to make it, one area if possible, but if we can't meet what we need to within that, let's look at other pockets that won't impact downtown. And I guess the only other question or comment I have is, I know we don't want to include all of downtown, but if we're looking at, 10 to 50 Main Street might be built up anyway, might it make sense to put that zoning there? That's all.
If I may.
That project has withdrawn, so.
Right, but we don't
Right
know
now.
what we, yeah, for right now anyway. I guess my concern would be, affordable housing is a very near and dear thing to me, so, it's very important for me. And for many other residents who want to live and stay in town, and live in an affordable, location. I just don't want to box out the affordable, units with respect to any zoning aspects that we're looking at. I know we've been talking about inclusionary zoning for the last 3 years, but nothing's actually been done about it. And actually, that's a tool that you could be using in your toolbox, one of the developers as well. We have inclusionary zoning, and that takes a little bit of the pressure off of you folks to make those decisions. So, if we're gonna do something like this, I would like to see that coincide with an inclusionary zoning, bylaw.
So I just have something to add with that. I don't know that we need to go for the inclusionary zoning bylaw. I think we can streamline this and start talking to the public and present options. But I think it should be the minimum 10%, but I would like to see part of the discussions, like what can we push that above 10%? I read some stuff online that they're definitely allowing up to 20 if you can show that it's economically, advantageous or not advantageous. So
Is that in the zoning? In the zoning?
look, all this stuff is loose and changing when they get pushed
Okay.
back in discussions.
Right.
So that is online right now, though. So if we make, let's just say we make 20%, you have to say, well, that can or cannot be economically viable, and that's a whole can of worms that Peter's been helping us. We're trying to get an economic development tool, but I don't want to settle for the 10%. I'm with you, Joe. I don't know that we can settle for only that, but I would like to make sure that's a parallel path. What is the maximum we can ask for on affordable while we?
Do we have some kind of technical help, Peter, that we can get from the state? Like, if we came out of this meeting with a sense that we want to push for 15%, let's say, in whatever zones that we create, can we reach out to the state and say, hey, we are thinking about 15%? What do we need to prove that can work, that can be economically viable?
Yeah, I can follow up, I think, I think I do know that 10%'s allowed, and they're accepting it at 10%. Anything above and beyond, I think that gets into the realm of obviously technical assistance, and then you're building, if you're gonna get technical assistance for that one element, maybe it makes sense to get technical assistance for the whole zoning development. That's what I would state.
Are you one of the things we'll maybe decide tonight is whether to push for a consultant, or, so what do you have to say about that, Peter? Do you have a recommendation, or?
You know what, it's kind of funny, right? In the grand scheme of things, I would say, yeah, a great consultant would be awesome to bring in. However, at the same time, we already have a consultant right now for the comp plan, right? Mm-hmm. And you don't want to put too many cooks in the kitchen. And so I think, can this be done in-house? I think it's a lot of work, and I think working with town council and, you know, and having people able to kind of bounce ideas off of would be critical. I think, going back to a point Anna made, I think a lot of communities are gonna struggle with this zoning. However, Ashland is densified over the last 2 decades. And so therefore, we do have some opportunities, some low-hanging fruit to kind of, or some building blocks to use as a foundation, which I think is great. So I think, can we do it in-house? Yeah, I think we can. But also, you know, does it make sense to go out and get a consultant? Another consultant for another zoning project on top of the consultant for the comp plan? I think you're just adding in more complications than you may.
Let's keep in mind that we don't have to pay for it. The state will pay for this consultant for the MBTA project.
We'd still have to manage that
So it's
process,
not
so-
like we would have to pay for it the way we did for the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan consultant is not going to be involved in meeting this compliance role. So it's a very, very different role entirely. What I will say is I love the idea of doing this in-house because it's simple. To me, it's really, really simple. If we can come up with the most simple solution possible, figure out how much we can zone at Cirrus, figure out between Chestnut Street and Pond Street, put it all together, take out the bylaw, change a few words, it's done. I don't think we need a consultant. But if we start to make it more complicated, if we start to add downtown to it, if we start to make it more affordable, we're starting to create controversy. We have to prove economic viability for higher affordable to beyond 10%. We have to convince the public through multiple public meetings that downtown is fair game. We're going to need a consultant for that. And so I would make the case that if we are here with some consensus of simplicity to rezone what's already dense, we do not need a consultant, and we could do this very quickly.
So I would say, I think the simplest thing, if we can make the rail transit district work for this, if we can change the zoning and it meets the density and it meets the area and it meets the acreage and all that stuff, the rail transit district was made for this. This is why we developed the rail transit district years ago, was to have an area that was near the train station. So,
That's true.
To be honest, like, you want to talk about something that's easy to convince the public that we have already thought about this? Like, to me, if the RTD meets the requirements, to me, that's a no-brainer. And and instead of like trying to show maps of like different areas that we're pulling this piece and that piece and this piece, I think if we can make it simple, I think that's our best bet, especially since it's already either built or permitted, you know, the majority of that space.
So I would agree with that. I would agree that if we can make it that simple, my concern is that we're not going to be able to make it, we're not going to be able to either A, match the unit numbers that we need for that, from that area, or that we're going to have enough land.
But I think we can figure that out pretty quickly. Like, it's
That
not.
can be figured out pretty
I
quickly.
think we can, I think it's time for us to look at, once you remove the cap out of it, out of those 94 acres, what do we have left? Plus, what do we have at Chestnut and what do we have at Pond? And I bet if we sit down and we actually look at it, we can reach consensus pretty quick, and this is a quick change.
Peter, do we have survey information for that whole tract of land? Do we know what's there and what's buildable and what's not buildable? Is that information that we already have in those files that you just moved to the?
We have a lot of information.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a lot of information we can dig through.
So-
And we have a lot of survey data, we have a lot of acreage data that I can kind of pull together. So, I think we have some clear, steps, and, from what I'm hearing, make it, the simpler the better.
Yep.
And obviously, within the rail transit district, obviously first. However, if we do have to look outside, we do have to look outside. And I think obviously there's pros and cons to all conversations and all realities. And so I think that's just something that we'll have to discuss further on down the line.
So it sounds like, Tricia, you're suggesting a working group to assist Peter in brainstorming once he has some data?
Yeah, I'm suggesting, and like I said, like you said, keep it simple, maybe one member from each board, to interact with each other, interact with Peter, brainstorm, so that we can get to some options.
And bring those here.
And to bring them to both boards as quickly as we can. And then whatever snags we hit along the way, we can discuss those snags and what direction we want to turn from there. Deepa, were you-
I'm just surprised that nowhere along this conversation that comprehensive planning consultant is going to help us out? Because comprehensive planning is all about master planning, right? We're talking about the big picture of Ashland. I'm just surprised that they are of no use at this point for us along this process. Like, looking at the zoning itself, right? They're talking about the big picture of Ashland. What is happening in this one? I'm sure they have tools that we could utilize to come up. Sounds like we're looking at 5, 6 options. I mean, I don't think we have 5, 6 options. It looks like it's going to be just matter of creating a spreadsheet with those different parameters, which feels like simple, but I don't think it's simple because it's just not number calculation. You're going to have underlying zoning, that's going to have, but I'm sure, and I'm also curious, like, between now and our spring town hall meeting, where is the comprehensive plan team going to be? Where are they in their process?
So, I mean, what I can tell you, and I will allow others to speak on what's going on with the comprehensive plan, but my reading of it, at least my 2 cents, is that the state has already planned for us. And so this is not a matter of us as Ashland needing a consultant to plan, right? The state is basically telling us, this is our plan. Our plan is that we are the greater Boston community, need more dense zoning right next to transportation to get people to work. So there's not much for planning purposes that a consultant could tell us, because the state is basically saying, we planned for you. You're kind of done. You got to do this or else.
Well, they're setting parameters on the big picture, right, on the larger scale, but we have a team that is so focused on Ashland and what's right for Ashland, without us just looking at colors and a legend. It's really important to understand, like you said, let's not touch downtown. Like, those elements is what that comprehensive plan team is looking into. So I'm sure they have and their tools that we could steal to make this decision. It's just not a metrics that we need to look at. We need to look at the big picture, because it talks about density, whether it's 15 units or 23 units. It starts to talk about other implications that this is going to have, which we are probably not seeing, because we are going to be stuck with that 0.5 mile radius and that 50 acres or 75 acres. I feel like when somebody is zoned out at that comprehensive level plan, they should be able to tell us, hey, here are some options. I mean, they may be.
But keep in mind,
So
I'm
Deepa-
going to let Yolanda get
I
in.
mean, if I could.
So Deepa, I think for us to say that they won't help us at all, I don't think that's completely accurate. I think we're not going to have them spend a lot of time, but certainly when we talk about, part of the comprehensive plan is looking at our community zoning.
Yeah.
So this will be part of that discussion. And housing, right? So I think part of it, though, is where is that happening in our timing, right? We're having our first meeting with the consultant next week.
Okay.
And then once we have that going, we're going to lay out a plan as to when things happen. Might we decide to do zoning first? But it's a process. So I
we're
think
not yet there.
we don't know that
Okay.
we'll have the zoning discussion completed before we need to have this completed, if we want to do this at Springtown. I mean, that's
That's what I was
May,
thinking.
right? It's
Yeah.
September.
Yeah.
So
But also,
I think it'll be
just
part
to
of the
be clear
discussion,
that,
but
That's what I was
the
looking for.
comprehensive plan
Timeline.
Hold on,
consultant is,
Okay, go ahead.
is not rewriting our zoning. That is very clear. That's not part of the package, right? They have some recommendations, but it is not, that is 100% my recollection of the scope of work. So I think between the timing and their scope of work, we're not going to be getting more than minimal help, as Yolanda said, from that consultant.
Yeah, I don't think Deepa was implying that a consultant would be rewriting our zoning. I think it was more that,
Will
hey,
it be
isn't
part of
this,
the discussion?
because when we talked about even the comprehensive plan early on, we talked about, let's move housing toward the beginning so that we can have these discussions. I think that's what comes into play here.
Yeah.
But there might not, like Yolanda was saying, it might not be tight enough to do that. So that might be something we just have to see as we go
But
along.
I would think, as we're having the discussions about housing and if there's zoning changes with the community, certainly the MBTA community is going to come up, right? I mean, I remember early on when we heard about this, we've heard a lot of people saying, what do you mean we have to meet this? I mean, people were not in town are not happy about this. But if we can find a way to do it with things that are already zoned or close to it, I think we can help them understand why we should move forward with this.
I think one of the things the public forgets is that there's been a lot of planning already at the state level and at the local level for these areas, such as Rail Transit District, Pond Street. These areas, essentially, we had consultants. We had
overlay
planning
district,
done
yeah.
decades ago. And so in some ways, we don't need to replan what we already did, what we already planned. And I would argue that the state's intentions are clearly within the construct of exactly what the town of Ashland already planned for. And as controversial as that might be, as long as we don't touch downtown, we're technically doing exactly what we've already been doing.
All right. So-
I would say I would be, I'll let you jump in.
Well, I was just going to say, so before we get into I personally would like to see a few different scenarios. Like, I wouldn't mind if Peter or whoever this working group is presents us different options and ways of doing it. I think that's fine, so people can kind of think about it. So I think you were suggesting a kind of working group that would work with Peter, one member from each committee. Is that what basically we're proposing here?
That's what I would propose, just to keep it very simple, and then have those members obviously report back to their group, perhaps every meeting, because I think we want this to move forward fairly, quickly.
Yeah, the timeline.
But I also think there's a way, it's inevitable that the people reporting back also are going to be in touch with the comprehensive plan people, because we all sit at the same table, and to make sure that connection happens as well, if there's anything that they should be mutually
Sure.
informing each other of.
And
So-
the timeline, so I kind of think the Springtown meeting's a good goal. So we're actually talking about, this is September, I don't know, next few months and into February, March to have something ready, right? Is that kind of like the
Peter,
timeline?
what does your timeline look like?
I think timeline-wise, you probably want something, early December,
To then go,
options to start thinking about it, yeah.
oh, you mean for us to,
Start talking about it, yeah, because
oh, sure. But I was
yeah.
thinking more like the finished product to start having public hearings and stuff. You're
Oh,
gonna have
that,
to do that
no.
April,
No, I take vacation at Christmas time.
March. Yeah, no, I'm not saying Christmas, but,
You're
so
probably-
we're
you're
talking
probably
about
looking at
March or so.
February.
Yeah,
February,
okay.
March before you post it.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm just gonna be devil's advocate for a second.
sure.
The master plan's gonna happen, right? And we're gonna do a lot of work on it, right? And we can take advantage of working with the housing, with our consultant. And big deal, the deadline. Deadlines are deadlines, right? What's the old joke about deadlines? Deadlines are supposed to be broken, right? So the deadline comes December 31st, 2024, right? The master plan's just starting to wrap up, right? It's gonna be a lot of work. What if we work something through and we say, okay, we'll propose something for the spring of 25, and we're gonna use all the work that we've done and we've wrapped it in. And yes, for 5 months, we're not allowed to, apply for grants or something like that, but 5 months goes by like this in municipal government. So I think there's two options to think about here, I don't think to say, yes, we need to do, I would say, yeah, let's get it for the spring, that's great, let's do it for the spring, and the fall is not that bad either, right? And if we're gonna piggyback on some of the work from the comp plan, then maybe there's a little bit of a lag time, and so, not just to throw it out there as a play in the devil's advocate position, but there's all different elements that you have to think about when you start this process.
Which I was actually going to bring up, right? We're saying, we want to do it for spring because if something happens, then we can bring it to the fall. But we don't know yet how they're going to respond if we say, you know what, we brought it to our fall town meeting and it didn't quite, we have to do some tweaking. I don't think we might, if that happens, we won't be the only community. And,
What do we have to gain? We already have developed these areas in a dense way right next to the MBTA, just like the state intended. We did exactly what we already planned for. What do we gain in utilizing an aspirational planning process, the comprehensive plan, which touches upon so many different areas, not just transportation? What do we possibly have to gain other than failing to comply with a state mandate, being part of one of many areas of our community or the state where the state is threatening lawsuits? Why would we want to literally follow the advice to break state law? I'm very much against that. I'm not comfortable with that. And as a
Can I just,
resident of
respond?
Ashland, I'm
I-
against
Claudia,
it.
yeah.
Yeah,
go ahead,
I'm not in favor of breaking state law. However, I think it is pretty important that it be in a discussion with the Comprehensive Planning Committee. That's a group of citizens who have stepped forward to be extremely involved in the future of our community. And so you have people who are ripe to participate in this conversation, need to hear it, need to be able to take it to the larger public. And, to your point, I understand the community's planned for like the rail transit district, and the state has planned that for us. I understand that. However, if you go out in the street and ask people, they don't think there's much planning that's gone on to the when Cirrus came down. So, we need to take advantage. The other thing is, when we brought on this team, I think the most important factor in this particular group was that they had the best plan for involving the community. I mean, this is about the community, and I understand it would be great if it works out nice and simply, and it really fits into what's already been laid down. That's all very good, but it has to be a conversation, I think, within.
And I would agree with
that
that,
group.
but I don't think we need to miss the deadline. I think we can have a
No,
working
you can make the
group.
deadline, absolutely, but I think Peter's point is just that
It's not the end of
you
the
know,
world.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world, and who knows, by the time we were maybe faced with missing the deadline, it might be every other community's missing the deadline too, so the state might react differently.
I don't
but-
think there's any reason to, I think it's impossible to try to predict right now how this is going to proceed. Maybe we're going to look at the first plan and we're like, this is a piece
great.
of cake, people. The town's going to love this, and it'll be all over. Maybe we'll have 10 schemes and we'll hate them all, and we can't figure it out. We have no idea. So all I can say is, like, let's start the process. Peter, a lot of this depends on Peter and Alvaro's hours. We're going to have to work carefully with them to say, Tricia, I can't get into this for 3 weeks, right? Maybe that's going to be the case. And let's just see how the process goes and stays in communication about how it goes, because we can't predict where we're going to be in December or May or next November from where we're sitting right now. We're just starting. This is our first discussion about it.
Yeah.
So again, I guess I would say, like, is there anyone from the select board?
Nosies, wait a minute.
Oh, right.
Just kidding.
I'd be willing to volunteer for this. I feel as though, being the least experienced member, I'm not I worry about what I can bring to the plate, except maybe asking questions because I'm not as well versed in some of this.
Claudia, you bring a lot of knowledge of Ashland, and that's what you
Well, I
have
bring
to
some
He's
national
buttering you up,
knowledge,
yeah.
however, that's
So
not-
it sounds like we have a
I
volunteer.
say we have a volunteer.
But the other
gonna say,
thing,
if you're
Claudia,
anything-
Hold on a second.
Wait a minute, Joe wants to
raise my hand.
volunteer.
the other
Yeah.
thing I think, I think either of you
Sorry,
would
no,
be
seriously.
good.
How about both of you?
What I think, no, I think we wanted to have one, otherwise it's a subcommittee and there's all kinds of stuff to deal
We
with.
still have to do
Fair
I
enough.
think it has to be one.
That's fine.
Committee then?
I have no idea. One is fine.
If it's a working group, it's different than a
Flip a
subcommittee.
coin.
So, I think either one of you would be great. What I think for you, Claudia, because this happened to me when I worked on our first housing production plan, I learned so much about rules and regulations and what it means for the community. So either one of you, whoever, flip a coin or however you want to do it, but
So I take it, so both Joe and Claudia are interested?
Very interested.
Okay, so,
Well, why don't we'll arm wrestle later.
we don't
and
have to make a decision
Get back
now.
to you.
We'll-
How's that?
Yeah.
and we are, I don't think it's bad to have two members. I don't know, so.
One
Want to
question,
make it a subcommittee.
one
Well,
question
but
Peter had
How
is
does that, I'm not sure I understand that.
ability to meet during the day,
Open meeting laws.
I assume.
But it's 3 for us.
Subcommittee is two.
Two.
Oh,
That's why.
okay.
we do
Two makes an
28.
official subcommittee.
Okay.
So let's just stick to one, to make it efficient.
Well-
And you guys are going to bring it back to us, right?
Yeah.
To this group.
And while they're thinking, Deepa, I assume you are at capacity, I think, right? I don't want to speak for you, but I'm giving you an out if you need it.
I am.
Okay.
I have too much going on till next year, for sure.
She looked tired when she got here today. And Kate and Anna, I assume, given,
I have no problem with Tricia, with you doing it. In light of your notes, you were on top of it.
this is
so-
me desperately
She's
trying to
volunteering
learn.
you.
So if you have interest in this topic, I would have no issue having you step up and help Peter come up with some variables.
I certainly don't feel like I have to have it, but I know you two are your load's only going to get heavier, and so I want to,
I know that I would
I'm
be.
offering it, but not, I keep looking
I'm
at
good.
Kate on the screen here, but.
No, I'd be happy if you can do that.
Well, and
Keep it to
as you said, if
simple
it could be during the
scenarios.
day.
Okay. Yeah, and I can meet, my time is really flexible, which helps Peter out instead of having another evening meeting.
That's
So,
my challenge too,
Yeah.
during the day.
yeah, and Marcelo's is as well.
I mean, where I'll add a willingness to help is when it's time to start rewriting the zoning. I would be more than happy to utilize my Northeastern Law degree to help pull research, or whatever you might need to change words.
I think if we do, the one takeaway is if we do this in-house, and I think it's capable, I think it's gonna be, obviously, it takes a village, right? And in every community, it takes a village, and so it's gonna take a lot of people, a lot of, experiences, like, obviously, your writing skills and, our knowledge of the community and what have you, so I think it'll be a good process, and I'll guarantee you one thing, Claudia, you will learn a lot about zoning even if you don't want to, so.
Well, it could be Joe too. I know Joe.
Yeah.
really
Would Joe?
wants to,
So-
yeah.
So we don't need to,
So we'll talk, we're meeting,
We have a meeting
Next
next
week?
week,
You guys
so
have a
we'll
meeting?
have it as part of our discussion.
and we'll talk
They'll duke
about
it
it.
out before then and let us
Yeah.
know.
that sounds like a good idea.
Is there
Okay.
a way to keep, before we come up to the spring meeting, is there a way to involve or let the public know where we are in this process?
We have to.
Maybe there are brainstorming ideas and maybe there are, I mean, I know it's hard to segregate noise from the actual facts, but if there is a way that we bring along the community in this journey and not just present something, come to this,
Right.
I don't know what's the best way to do that.
I think maybe once we have a few
Something,
options, I'm
yeah.
not going to say a certain number, then maybe that's a time where, obviously, we get together again and we make sure it's out there to the public that we are going to be discussing these options would like some feedback.
Can
Because
we
maybe that's
agree-
where you integrate it with the comprehensive plan process. you
Can
know.
we
Could be.
agree on November as a
Okay.
time to come back here with your work? And then if we have another joint meeting in November, we can brainstorm how to get the public involved, including the comprehensive plan steering committee, so that whatever it is that we land on as a presentation for the public, we can deliver it to whomever it is that we need to deliver it to. Would November be reasonable?
I think so. I think November. Planning board gets funny in November just because the fourth Thursday is Thanksgiving.
And it's my birthday.
And it's
So
your
I'm useless.
birthday. Holy moly. Learning a lot of
It
facts
falls on
tonight.
Thanksgiving every 4 years or something like that. It's a lot to be grateful for.
So with that, I think, I think if it's a Thursday, if it may be, we may have to schedule it a select board meeting. But I think, looking at the.
Oh, sure.
It could be a Wednesday night, it could be a Monday night, who knows? I think we just have to be flexible and,
What are
take
we
it from
talking
there.
about, the presentation of the
I
scenarios?
think I think we can
to
start
us.
talking about, presentation and scenarios, I think come,
Okay, yeah. Select
November.
board meeting would be good.
And then,
Okay.
December, typically the planning board usually gets a good, one solid meeting in December, just because things get pretty busy at the end of it with old snake Nick knocking at the door. So, I think, Joe?
But we will have a new associate member who could help us spread the word with the public.
Okay.
That could be one important task
All
for
right,
the
so we,
associate member.
All right,
we're
so we'll-
finished here, or
Yeah,
with
so
the
we'll
first one?
look at it, we'll look at one of the November meetings, maybe a select board meeting to have
Yeah.
this next conversation with some, at least draft scenarios like
Yeah,
in front of
That
us.
sounds great.
And the select board will let us know who's gonna, yeah. Okay, so
Okay.
the other two, items on the joint meeting, the first one is, I'm just gonna take them both together. Interim zoning related to comprehensive plan, this might have been already discussed in point one. And other items of select board, planning board coordination. These 2 points were kind of not meant to be like another hour-long conversation, but more of a chance for us to brainstorm about things that we wish we do have a chance to talk to each other about, and so that they can be put on some future agenda. So I just, I guess, kind of open up the floor to those kind of topics, just throwing out there about things that we maybe should talk about together.
So Joe has raised inclusionary zoning as something for us to come back to. So I would suggest that we add that to our next joint discussion.
That was going to be my suggestion.
So I want to
Okay.
honor that. And what I would add related to that is that we no longer have a housing moratorium. And from my understanding, we're now susceptible to 40B And so I think we should give it some urgency to discuss affordable housing, whether it's together with Joe's point of inclusionary zoning or not. I think we need to take that very seriously, and the comprehensive plan process, which could take multiple years before you even start to zone, because usually there's a planning and then there's a implementation phase. And so it could take another 2 to 4 years before we have an actual rezoning of our community. Meanwhile, we have multiple years of vulnerability to 40B without a plan. And we have a responsibility as a planning board with select board support and input to immediately start rezoning so that we can properly address the needs of our community and not simply fly by the seat of our pants whenever a developer proposes 40B.
So I would say, we did do, Tricia and I were working with Peter and MAPC on an inclusionary zoning bylaw that we got probably 90% to the goal line. And in fact, I think the last discussion was with the planning board, actually, before it was going to go to town meeting, and then we kind of decided to table it. Because the discussion was that it was a rushed thing. We didn't want to rush it. It could be revisited with some tweaks, probably, without a lot of heavy lifting, although I do know that it will become a huge factor when we start talking about the comprehensive plan. So,
Yeah, obviously, when we have that zoning, inclusionary zoning / affordable housing conversation, we should not be starting with a blank sheet of paper.
Correct. Yep.
So,
Right, so I guess the other thing is, and yes, I think both of those are things that we need to talk about, but I guess the other thing for me, and I know Joe supports this as well, is in regards to affordable housing, we can be doing things before we change our zoning. We can be doing, as a community, as a decision, it could be said, if you're bringing us a building of a certain size, we are going to require 25%. Or any size building, we're going to require 25%.
And that's where-
And hold on, Joe. But you don't even have to have inclusionary zoning, right? As a developer comes in with a project, we all know affordable housing is important, and we know that if a larger, anything over 4 units, if it has 25% affordable, all of those units count. And let me finish. And we already have a housing production plan that says if we do certain things and make sure that when new developments come in, we can include more affordable, we'll get to that point. So you don't even have to change your zoning. It's just an approach when new projects come in.
A policy approach?
I agree. Well, I agree with you. I don't think you'll find anyone at this table that says not interested in affordable housing. We all have people that we know personally who struggle with that in this community. But I also think, given the projects we have gone through recently on the planning board, it's not the only thing. We have to look at affordable housing, we have to look at business, we have to look at traffic, we have to look at schools, we have to look at sustainability, we have to look at open space. So.
And you do too, because you have a budget.
Right. So when those things all come into factors on the same project, affordable housing doesn't win every time. And so that's the thing that, so that I'm just saying that our job is not that straightforward. And so it will continue to be complex, that one of these things doesn't rise to the top.
But there
every
is
time.
something we can do that is more straightforward, which is we can take charge of our own future, like other communities that Peter has been involved with, who purchase property and build affordable housing. So it's much more difficult when you have a private developer constrained by zoning and certain different interests, such as traffic, et cetera, et cetera. It is a lot easier if we as a community, if the group here can come together and say, you know what, we're going to develop as a community. We can have public housing in this community, and that would solve our problem very quickly.
That would be wonderful in the real world of make-believe, because the Affordable Housing Trust has been working for the last 8 years to find a contractor that would be willing to do what you just said, and we're not able to find one.
So let's have that conversation,
So
because
we're
Peter
gonna-
has done it.
so-
I'm just saying.
So that's why-
We've been having this within ourselves, we've been having that conversation.
I totally understand. I had a conversation about similar things just recently. But we're not going to discuss it right now.
Right.
Because it's going to be a heated one, and we're all looking forward to that. So,
Well, it sounds like we got some good issues to.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else besides inclusionary zoning
Joe,
and
was your
affordable
mic just
housing?
on?
Those will obviously be at the top of the pile.
The sewer
and town
moratorium?
development
couldn't
of
hear you.
affordable housing, which is its own topic.
I'm sorry, was it?
I guess, but it's all housing.
Was Kate saying
Yeah,
something?
also the sewer moratorium, is that's kind of
I'm
related
sorry,
to-
Kate, could you say that again?
The sewer moratorium?
Okay, thank you.
Because that's kind of related to all these things too.
So, yeah, just to kind of piggyback on that. So I saw some, I suggested this topic, or it seemed like a good idea because, the housing moratorium was thrown out and we are now using the sewer moratorium. And we can apparently extend that. And although it's not subject to 40B, although I think it's a little hazy because I don't know if a sewer system doesn't exist, how you can build a big apartment building, but, there is that aspect, yeah. So I guess is that, are we, so in terms of the profile or the next 2 or 3 years until the comprehensive plan zoning recommendations come out, so looking at it kind of like a big picture, are there things that we think we should do in the interim, to Anna's point? And we now have the sewer moratorium as our main planning tool at the moment. And are we happy with that? Are there other things that we want to identify? We talked about inclusionary zoning and affordable housing in general, which I think are all good. But in terms of zoning things, is there anything we should be thinking about in terms of zoning? Or other whether they're procedural things about the 25% requirement? I'm not sure the tool for that. But is that, that's the kind of where I thought it's a conversation worth having about those things. So, so I'm just open to ideas or thoughts on that are we happy with the general outlines of the zoning that exists? And to go to Anna's point about years of zoning and thinking, are there immediate problems that we see? So the next time a big project gets proposed and we all go, well, that's in the zoning, so we just have to review it. I mean, is there anything that we've seen that we want to pick out and say, look, we know that we want to do something fairly soon? So that's, I guess I'm throwing that out there.
We did at one point, this was a while ago, I think it was shortly after West Union, 81 West Union Street.
We rezoned
That we were starting to,
storage, self-storage, and landscaping.
yeah, so we're starting to look at some of the categories of the zoning of what's allowed in different zones. And so what our categories are when the zoning was created, which I don't even know how many years ago that was now, might be quite different than how we view, Pleasant Street now. We might view that in a very different way. We have a river walk now. We have other things that maybe are allowed under our zoning right now that maybe we wish weren't, right? And so those are little tweaks in the zoning. It really is a line item, take this off. But things that
I was
maybe we should
thinking
look
Wouldn't
at.
that also
housing
be part of
density.
the comprehensive plan discussion when we're looking at our community?
It can
Right?
be, but-
We're gonna look at, okay, we have this kind of housing, we have, what are our needs? I mean, some of that will be part of the comprehensive discussion.
It's true, but we also just talked about that this is interim zoning related to
No, I understand.
comprehensive
So,
plan.
so
right?
here's a challenge. We've got 40 Main Street pulling out, right, and making it quite clear that they may come back as a 40B. That's clear to us. We do not know if the sewer moratorium will stop that. In fact, I don't think we want that to happen because we care about affordable housing, right? So we can't kind of have it both ways. Ooh, we really want more affordable housing, but thankfully we have the moratorium to prevent housing. You can't do that. You have to kind of make a decision as a community, what are we doing? If we want to create housing and opportunity for growth, what does it look like? So my suggestion is we start looking at economic development in Massachusetts. If you read the Worcester Business Journal, what you're seeing is that where are the business needs, right? Commercial real estate is struggling, but there are certain forms of real estate that are growing quite nicely. There's not enough hotels in the state of Massachusetts. There's not enough, the hospitality industry is taking off, right? You can see it through the development of Airbnbs, et cetera. The future of zoning is going to be in hospitality and Airbnbs. And if you look at our communities that are more urban, that's where they are. We are behind them, right? Because we are not yet dense enough. But we're going to be looking at those issues 5-10 years from now. This is not rocket science. Let's read the Business Journal. Let's figure out where the economic development is. I, for one, think we should start to rezone downtown to allow hotels, which currently is not allowed. I think Ashland could become quite vibrant if we attract that type of economic development and we stop relying on developers and multifamily housing for tax funds.
All right,
So I would say,
that fits
just
under
to that,
category.
just to
Let's try
that
to keep
point,
it to
it's-
categories, though,
right.
and not like arguing
No,
about certain
right,
points.
but no, I understand.
But I wouldn't go off do a huge tangent, because economic development is not what we, are tasked with at this point. Economic development will be.
Zoning is our task. We are the planning board.
All right, let her
That's
finish.
exactly
Let her
our
finish.
task.
So I would say economic development as part of the comprehensive plan will be a discussion. I think a lot of this will be part of the comprehensive plan. I think if we jump the gun on pretty much any of this, we're doing the community a disservice, because we had promised that we were going to go through this huge planning exercise, spend a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort to do it. So
Yeah.
while I think that it's great to have ideas and it's great to talk about these things, I think that, for our time together, I don't think it's best served going through things that are going to be part of this comprehensive plan, because that's where the focus should be, and that's what we're tasked with to do.
Can I address that? Ann, I think those are great ideas, but they do strike me as a comprehensive plan kind of process. I guess what I was getting at is, what's the near-term stuff that we as elected officials, the next time someone files something and people think it's horrible, and, do we want to throw up our hands and say, well, 20, 15 years, 15, whatever, they said that kind of density was great here, and this is what the guy's building, so that's what's happening.
Well,
So I'm just like, is there something we should take action on? We had a moratorium for a reason. That's been thrown out. What are we replacing it with? Or what do we do to be, at least on this interim, I'd call it really a 4-year period? What should we be doing, or what, so that strikes me as a great idea, but I don't see that as a near-term kind of we got a problem.
It's a town meeting model, right? And so at any point, we can propose zoning, and the jurisdiction of the planning board, including the comprehensive plan, is to rezone. I don't think one stops the other, and the two are really interrelated. And
Right.
there are communities that, there's many communities who have a old mill downtown who have done both. You can do a comprehensive plan and at the same time revitalize your downtown at the exact same time.
All right, so we're looking at meetings one that involves housing and inclusionary zoning, and another that still might talk about these interim measures, which,
Yeah.
like I know that there are things that we may want to take out of the locations there are.
And you don't want to wait 4 years.
That's right,
Yeah.
until the comprehensive plan says, no, put that back in there. We want that function there, right? So, okay, so unless someone has something different to add.
Does the Upper Charles Trail Committee need help in kind of a joint discussion? Are they hitting a plateau, and is there something that we could help? Because it seems like last few projects that's come up a lot.
And they've seemed like they've gone back and forth. They gave us the impression that they've gone back and forth, and haven't found a
Could we help them
home.
in some way?
Well, that'd be
I don't know if
great,
it's
but
a joint discussion.
I see
Well,
Jen's waving her hand. Jen, you may want to come up here. Sorry, Jen, you gotta,
And then candidates, we're going to wrap up and get to the
Yeah.
next.
So we've been
one.
working with the Upper Charles Trail, so that's one of during our retreat, was one of the projects that we've trying to put some resources in over the next year. So Peter and Alvaro, Michael and I have been working with Upper Charles Trail, looking at the current parcels that they need easements, sort of our initial look to see, what kind of work can be done in the next 6 months and then 12 months. So we may be coming back, but right now I think we've been working just to do some deed work, and then also some discussions around, how feasible of some of the easements that are on the route, with some serious focus on the town-owned properties.
So would that be an item that you would give us a heads up, or that, hey, we really could use a joint meeting about this?
For sure.
There's things we need to talk about.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay,
That'd be great.
good. All right.
So
Good call,
in
Deepa.
terms of process, then, so in terms of discussing these issues, is there kind of willingness to move forward to continue this discussion, whether it's inclusionary zoning and some of these others? I'm looking at my fellow board members.
Yeah, that's what I thought
Okay, so
too.
we'll include that in our November discussion. Okay.
I thought
Yes.
no-
No, I thought I thought November was
For
gonna
the
be,
MBTA.
the
Yeah.
working group was gonna come back with potential ideas for the MBTA zoning and where that's gonna be. And I have a feeling that's gonna be a long enough discussion, especially
may
if we're
be
gonna
right.
put it as part of one of our select board meetings, right? Because so.
Yeah,
I would
agreed.
say these other things, we need to look at future meetings to see how we can fit them in with everything else that we're working on.
I think future meetings, and I think also looking at what other players are in here. We had a housing meeting before we included other groups in that housing meeting, and so, and I think, Brandy, I'm looking at you, because not too long ago, you said, hey, should we have another one of these? One of these housing meetings. So, but I do think that should be separate from getting the work done about MBTA.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll put it on some future. You
We're
and
trying
I
to
will
avoid
discuss
those
it.
11:30 nights.
Yeah, that's right.
All of us
Okay.
are.
So we do have a responsibility to bring that to the comprehensive plan process, the housing piece. And I squarely agree with that. And so I would urge those folks who are interested, I think we should have a housing venue with, I think we had 3 boards last time, and we were so thrilled and excited to get going, and then we kind of stopped. And I think we need to restart that so that we can deliver some input to the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee as to kind of where we are as a community on those issues.
I would
And what are our limitations, right? Because we've tried this.
I would recommend that when we talk about housing as the comprehensive plan, we make sure that those boards are invited so they can be part of the discussion. I don't personally, knowing the work, we have the housing production plan, knowing the work that has been done for inclusionary zoning, those are documents that can be presented to the comprehensive plan group, and it can be part of that. I don't know that the 3 boards need to have a separate meeting to discuss where we're at with these other things. Send the documents out, let people review them, and as we're in the comprehensive plan discussion housing, and it's not going to be one meeting or one discussion on housing. There's going to be a discussion with the public, then there's going to be a discussion with the group, with the consultant, and then there's going to go back out to the community.
And I
So-
have no issue with that, except we have to remember that's not going to create zoning change. And so meanwhile, while that really important process is happening, we are susceptible to 40B, and we have we're essentially defenseless against any planning measure that we could choose. And so if the idea is somehow we have to do one comprehensive plan before we do zoning, that is a mistake, because we're essentially
Yeah,
making
I-
ourselves completely vulnerable.
I think we got it. I think everyone here is well aware of being in that position. So, okay, so
Right.
why
So we'll
don't,
continue that process.
so we're good for now? We obviously
I
have
think so.
lots of stuff to resolve. Okay. All right, so thanks, everybody, for that. I do appreciate you joining us here, because we have to make some progress on these things, as tough as it is, and however many arguments we may get into. All right.
Discussions, important discussions.
Yes, discussions.
Debate.
Okay, so the next item on our agenda, which is in front of me, is obviously the associate member position. The planning board was unfortunate to lose our associate member position at the end of June. So the person who was, Kevin McLean, who was our associate member, decided not to renew for the next 3 years. He has a young child. He's travels a lot for work, and he just could not do it, though he was an extremely valuable, I think everyone on the planning board would say he was an extremely valuable member of our team, and the select board had helped put him in that position. So we were glad to have him there through some tough projects. But that position has been open since the end of June. So of course, summer being a little bit tough time to get work done, but we're happy to start out kind of the fall with maybe being able to fill that position. I wanted to review just very briefly, as we had been through this in discussions in the planning board before we put someone in the position the last time, before Kevin was in the position. what the planning board is looking for, just to make it clear, is that we're really looking for someone who will be able to attend most, if not all, the same as any other member of the planning board, be able to attend our meetings. They're the second and fourth Thursday of the month. They generally go to 7:15. We've been pretty good about keeping them at 10:15 or a little bit less. We have been quite a bit later than that, though, like I said, we struggle not to go there anymore. And in that position, the person really has a full voice in discussion. They are able to participate in any discussions that we have on the various topics. Please correct me if I misspeak about something, Peter. But that associate position member is only able to vote on issues that are a special permit. So not on a site plan review, only on a special permit as per the Ashland bylaws. So,
Can I make
sorry,
a
Kate.
slight correction to that? I think it's
Please.
only a special permit if somebody's recused. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, sorry, Kate, yes, so, yeah, so on, yeah, that's kind of critical, right? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Forget the election, you're voting.
Yes. You know I'm not a night person, right? So the associate position steps in and votes when one of the five people on the board has to recuse themselves, and which has happened in the past, whether it's because the project, the person is a butter to a project that we are reviewing, if the person has I would assume has is a friend or something of the owner of a property that we're reviewing, if there's some reason they need to recuse themselves. Also, it's important for a person to be able to sit in on those meetings every time, because we can have a circumstance where for some reason, a health reason and some other kind of emergency reason, that a board member has to recuse themselves in the middle of a special permit application, in which case the associate member could simply step in to that missing slot. So thank you for that correct. That was a big correction, so thank you for that. That was huge. Yeah, and also the note tonight is that why we hope to fill the position as soon as we can. The planning board and the select board, it's a joint position by majority vote of the two boards, but the boards are not under obligation to fill the position. So we fill the position when we find a person that we're satisfied will be a good member of the team. So with that, procedure for the night, Rob, do you want to talk about that? Or I can if you want, but
Yeah,
we
I
kind
think
of
you
did it
should,
together.
yes.
Okay.
I think we'll follow your lead in terms of
Well,
how
make sure you
wanna
correct
handle-
me if I get it
Okay, I'll
wrong,
do that.
'cause-
We'll listen.
Obviously, I'm not perfect. Okay, so procedure for the discussion is that we will give each of you, 2 to 3 minutes of just a personal introduction, being able to tell us of, really whatever you think is important. How long you've been in Ashland, your time here, what you might be involved with, what you care about, anything you want to share with us. And then I believe, hopefully you both received a list of just 3 questions that we had decided to provide you with in advance, so you have some time to think about it. We'll let you answer those questions, and then we can, just individual members of the board can ask questions after that. I think you should be free as you go along to ask questions of us as well. We want to make sure if you're applying for the position that you also get your questions answered and feel comfortable with what you might be going into. So, anyone have anything to add to that? Okay. All right, so, looking for my agenda again. All right, so first person on our agenda, we went by last name alphabetical order, so is Amanda Hayes. Amanda, I'll ask you to come up to the microphone and just give a 2 or 3 minute introduction.
Thank you all so much. My name is Amanda Hayes. I've been in Ashland for just about 4 years. I am a commuter into Boston, so like Anna, I ride the train, and Brandy, I know we see each other often on the train on the ride and in the morning. I found this community by literally following the train line out to an affordable place to raise my young family. So we had one little girl when we bought our house, and now also have a young son. So my kids are 4 and 2. And my husband and I moved here right before the pandemic started. It was a very interesting time to start to get to know this community. The first places we got to know were the open spaces, because in the early times of the pandemic, we weren't gathering in in sort of indoor places with our young kids. So we really fell in love with the character of this town. Both of us are from the Midwest, and sort of love open spaces and appreciate opportunities to spend time outside with our family. I fell in love with this place, and sort of very immediately knew that I wanted to make it our family's forever home. And, you know, I just really don't envision a time when we would choose to leave. And so I think, for me, community service has always been a really important part of my life. I'm an immigration lawyer. I've dedicated my life to sort of giving back to communities in need. And, you know, for me, it's a no-brainer to try to seek to be part of the leadership in our town, to make it a better place, to really hear what residents need and want from their community, and to try to build consensus around that and make that happen. So that's what drew me to the opportunity to apply for the associate position. I think, you know, for me as well, I am excited about the opportunity to be, you know, involved in these discussions, understanding that it's, you know, a very limited role in terms of voting, but a really, you know, for me, an important way to help build consensus and bring perspective and help drive those conversations. So that's what's motivated me, and a little bit about myself. Do you want to just sort of delve into the answers to the questions, or is someone going to ask them?
I'm going to turn it over to Peter, who's going to
Okay.
answer the questions.
So I'm going to ask you the questions. So question number 1, describe one trait or skill that you use regularly in your profession that would be an asset to the work of the planning board.
Yes, so I'm an attorney by training. So I said I'm an immigration lawyer. I deal in very, very complex regulations daily. That is, I am sort of in the trenches with a very antiquated, clunky law and set of regulations, and trying to find a way to make that work for corporate clients. I mainly represent large businesses. That is my client population at this point in my career. So really problem solving and taking sort of, you know, things that are complicated, clunky, not intuitive, and finding, you know, having a problem presented to me and finding a way to drive to a solution that works, you know, within the parameters of the structure that we're given in the regs and the legal framework, and finding a solution for clients and individual families, and making that work for them. So I think my superpowers are really, you know, taking really complicated problems and finding solutions to them in a way that is everyone can be happy with, that has like sort of consensus at the end of the day.
Question number 2, describe a situation where, as part of a group or committee with diverse viewpoints, you successfully work to achieve consensus.
This sounds like 9 a.m. on Tuesday to me. Like, I think, so my role, I manage a large team and a very large business account for our practice. And I would say I sort of open my inbox thinking I'm going to do, you know, A, B, and C, and I'm immediately doing X, Y, and Z with, you know, the problem of the day. And really, consensus building is a huge, huge part of my job on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's a part of it that I'm really quite excellent at. So in terms of sitting down with, you know, someone saying it has to be X, Y, and Z for these reasons, and I just can't see a way through it, and someone else saying, nope, it has to be, you know, this way, and I just, you know, it's not going to work, whether it's a technology perspective or cost and budget and savings, and, you know, just sitting down and really taking a deep breath, breaking it down piece by piece and finding a solution that works for everybody. Again, that to me, that feels like, you know, that's sort of what I get up in the morning and do.
Question number 3, in your view, what is a member's role in communicating with the public, knowing that members are not permitted to speak on behalf of the board as a whole?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I think I know I haven't lived in town for nearly as long as many of you in this room, but I do sense that one of the common themes in town is sort of engagement and awareness, and making sure that the community is aware of what's going on and the decisions that are being made. I think there are folks sitting here in front of me that have a great way of communicating. I've learned about these opportunities through some of you here in this room, in terms of making announcements, whether it's on town forums and town boards. So for me, I think it's super important to make sure that anytime I'm communicating, whether it's at the farmer's market, or making a post on the community page or former happy board, I'm not really sure what we're calling it, but to understand that there could be a perception that I'm speaking in my role as a planning board member, to take that very seriously and to probably err on the side of not rather than yes. And so, and when I am going to post or sort of engage in that way, I think making very clear that you're doing so as a layperson, not as a member of the board. I will say, I think I feel really excited about the opportunity to help engage the community a little bit more in the work of these boards, because I've had the opportunity to join meetings and to watch and to participate as a member of the public. And I think, when you sit down, and even today when we're talking about you all are talking about the MBTA communities regulations, you think, people hear that and they're fired up. But there are like 10 people that are so well-meaning and really want to find the right answer for our community. And I think that gets lost in the translation. And so for me, whether it's, I think, Kate is a great example, posting the opportunity for the comprehensive plan and that committee to be able to say, like, hey, listen, we want as many applications for this as possible because this is a really big deal for our community. I learned about, that initiative from that information that she put out there. And so I think there's a huge element to driving engagement just with information. And I think that is, whether it's saying, this is the agenda for the planning board tonight, and, this is what each item means in lay people terms, 1060, that's the mills, and making sure that that information is accessible to folks. And so I guess that's a little bit of a word salad, but for me, it's sort of two parts of the problem, right? Making sure that when you're posting or you're talking in the community that you're erring on the side of caution, because I think it could always be perceived as a statement from the board, but then also sort of doing all we can to make sure that the public's aware of what's going on in the hard work of these boards and sort of the thought process that goes into a lot of these decisions.
So, question to the board, because I never quite thought this through. Do we want to talk to both candidates, or should we, and then ask individual questions?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think if we have individual questions now would be.
Okay, so any extra questions from any member of the board?
So I don't necessarily have a question, but I did just want everyone to know. So several of us have met Amanda through the comprehensive plan process. So Amanda had joined our project management team meetings way early in the process, way before the steering committee kind of came together. She was one of our only members of the public that came to our in-person meetings or joined us on Zoom, and she was enthusiastic and asked really good questions and was very engaged, and even kept coming back, even though some of those meetings were a little on the challenging side. So, but when we were talking about, and then she applied for the steering committee, and we had talked about when we were appointing the steering committee that we had some amazing candidates for the committee, and Amanda's precinct that she had applied for, we had another really strong candidate for as well. And so for me personally, it was the one thing that I wish we could have appointed two people from a precinct, because when we talked about what we wanted from our steering committee was really to bring in new people, some fresh perspective, to have really engaged new members of the public that really hadn't been a part of the boards, because we had plenty of representation from other boards. So it was just a really great experience to kind of get to know Amanda through that process. And you know, my statement is just that I think it's great that she decided to throw her hat in the ring for this position, and I would highly support her, so, thanks.
Thank you. Yolanda, you're next.
I have one question, and I always try to ask this of people who either step into a board and then potentially have to run for election. So as an associate, you don't have to be elected. It's so important that we have people who run for planning board. Is it something that, I mean, maybe you haven't thought about this yet, if you were appointed as the associate member and a seat opens up, would you then consider running to be a full member of the board?
I would.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's my only question.
What is the political situation here in terms of, is there an open seat that's
No.
gonna be up?
We just have an associate seat we want to fill.
Just the associate seat.
There's a
Marcel is just not here, able to be here this evening.
I just wanted to clarify, I don't think I would do that in a situation where I hadn't fulfilled my term as an associate member. I think I would want to make sure I fulfilled my commitment to the board in that position. But yes, I've thought about running, and I wouldn't be, opposed to running for an open seat if it opened up. I do think I would want to make sure that, we weren't leaving the board in a lurch in terms of not having an associate member. Yeah.
I will add, I think we're looking at a potential project that I will be in a butter on. So we will have, I think, I want to say the Shaws, I don't know if it would Drew, the project near Shaws. Who knows what the latest rumor is, but there's always a possibility that one of us will be recusing ourselves. And frankly, I think that's highly likely now with 40B. So I think that even if none of us are running or we don't have an opening, we're going to need an associate member.
Yeah.
I do have a question for Amanda, if appropriate.
I was actually, Joe had his hand up.
Just one quick question, Amanda. Appreciate all your thought out answers. One of the questions is, you have 2 young kids.
Yeah.
And this is going to be time committed. Will you be able to take that time away from your family, and how will that affect your situation at home?
Thanks for that question. I have a rock star husband, and we are very 50-50 partnership. And we had a family meeting about this before I threw my hat in the ring, and he's fully supportive. He's got stuff he does once or twice a month for, to fill his cup, and this would be my thing. And I think that's one of the things that I've felt so, coming to the comprehensive plan steering committee, those meetings, it was so energizing. And, I just got this feeling just sitting in the room, and, I got it again tonight listening to the conversation around the MBTA. I just kind of wanted to roll my sleeves up and get in there. And so I think it is really fulfilling for me. And I mean, I'm a hard worker. I have no issue putting in the time. And when I'm pumped and motivated for something, I'll find the time. And I have, 100%. I've got the rest of the Hayes clan at my back on this one.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Anna?
Amanda, and I'll ask the other candidate the same question. I think part of our expertise as a planning board, we all have kind of something we bring to the table, but we also function as a unit when we make certain decisions to the best of our ability. Obviously, we argue, we fill gaps for each other, and our last associate member had some expertise, if you will, in certain areas that we lacked. Kind of watching the planning board in action tonight or other meetings, can you give us something that you would contribute to this mix of this specific, unique planning board that could help us fill a gap?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I don't want to presume to know everyone well enough to know what the gaps might be. I think, listening to the conversation tonight, I absolutely would have raised my hand to work with Peter on the sort of, the project for the MBTA, to put some scenarios together for you all. Because I think what I really love is taking a really complicated problem and a logical conundrum and dissecting it and coming up with solutions. And so, my mind was already sort of racing in terms of, all right, you move this here. And I think, Anna, you were working in a similar way. So I don't know that it's filling a gap, but I do think that analytical skill set for me, in addition to, I think, I would hope that I could really bring an ability to sort of bridge some gap with the community and to be able to sort of be able to say, again, this is what's going on tonight. We'd love to have people show up. Here's a Zoom link, and this is what each agenda item means, and even if it's just that. And I think those are the two things that come to mind for me.
Anyone else? I'll just ask one question then. This is from a list of questions that Marcelo, who's not here tonight. The planning board has and it might be apropos for our meeting, the planning board has a very supportive and collegial group, even when the meetings, hearings, and decisions are long, difficult, or filled with challenges and disagreements. How can you contribute to help maintain or improve the current collegial nature of the board?
I think I don't want to be repetitive. I think I may have touched on, I think building consensus and sort of being diplomatic are some of my better traits. I'm an oldest sibling of 3, and I have 2 younger brothers. I think I was sort of from the jump refereeing and sort of building community. You know, I think if you go back to whether it's captains of sports teams, drum major of the marching band, resident assistant in college, like sort of more of those cheerleader type roles, I gravitate towards them. And, you know, I think for me, I really enjoy team building, being part of a team. And I am, you know, all about, you know, at the end of the day, you get to the same place. And then, you know, that's where the team landed. And that's, you know, that's where we are. And now we're a unit. So that's kind of my approach to most things in life.
Great. All set? Yes, yes. All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and our second candidate, Stephen Morgan.
Hey, good evening.
If you just want to provide us with a 2 to 3 minute introduction?
Sure. Steve Morgan. I am Ashland resident for going on 9 years now. Live off of downtown on Concord Street. I think some members are familiar with me, although I don't have personal relationships with any of the members. My background is I have an engineering degree from Worcester Polytech over in Worcester. Been doing projects, technical projects, and construction type projects for clients throughout my 40-year career. Currently work for a leading pharma company doing projects ranging from IT to building modification projects for the company. We have probably one of the most internationally recognized cultures of operations for interpersonal skills and how you run projects inside the company. I run typically, dozen projects at one time with financial responsibility and also working with schedulers and various constituent groups for functions to execute projects. So that's my background. I also have some, as I've probably mentioned previously, I have some commercial real estate experience, which I'm not currently involved with, but I've owned commercial real estate in the past and have dealt with a lot of the issues that come up with regard to having tenants and buildings and modifying buildings and taking older buildings and rehabbing those buildings for more modern use. So that is part of my experience base. Final point I'd make is I recently expressed some interest in a zoning board of appeals position. I do have an interest in planning. I was advised at that time to come back and look for another position. I thought this position, fit the bill where there might be some hesitancy with a full member position that wasn't elected, and this is an associate member position, so it seemed to fit the bill with the recommendation I received previously when you appointed the zoning board of appeals member. So when I learned of the position, I put my name back in the hat, and it seemed to be a good fit on that basis. So that's my introduction.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Morgan. So we're going to start to ask the 3 questions. So first, describe one trait or skill that you use regularly in your profession that would be an asset to the work of the planning board.
Yeah, so I think it would be a great asset for the planning board. The team building and the functional execution skills that I use on a daily basis. I see a lot of variety of projects, a lot of different personalities from different functional groups. In order to have a successfully executing project, you have to have a plan that progresses to conclusion. I understand in government work sometimes things take a little longer than in private sector, but we're accountable to work with people and accomplish consensus and get work done on a daily basis. So that is a key skill that I use all the time.
Thank you. Question number 2. Describe a situation where, as part of a group or committee with diverse viewpoints, you successfully worked to achieve consensus.
Sure. So in my world, I would pick a complex project. I did one for Sanofi, not my current employment, but a past contract employment. We moved a major regulatory change management system for them. They had been working on it for about 2 years. Had different plant sites, global audience in addition to local audience, different technology approaches being proposed, business critical system that was used for product release, obviously validated with the FDA. And that team had been struggling to migrate that system and upgrade it. Something as simple as, think of it as an application upgrade, but in this context, dealing with so much data that you literally couldn't move it in a timely manner to do the work. And so building the consensus around that team, replanning that project, taking the best ideas from the project and putting them into an executable plan, I think is a good example of what you'd be looking at there. You need to be able to implement things and have people aligned to support the implementation. So, I think that alignment is part of the key team building or alignment process that has to happen. People have to visualize the goal, they have to be aligned to the goal before they can start marching effectively to a goal, right? So that.
All right, thank you for that answer. Question number 3. In your view, what is a member's role in communication with the public, knowing that members are not permitted to speak on behalf of the board as a whole?
Well, this is a very key point of a lot of relationships. We have this issue with regulatory filings in FDA regulated companies all the time, because literally any adverse comment you can make anywhere can be misconstrued as a regulatory concern. So here, I think the focus is on facilitating communication back to the board. Not indicating any answers necessarily, but bringing people to the board for discussion, being able to communicate documents, point people at things that are necessary, to positively let people know what's going on an agenda. And I think those things are really what individual members would be doing. I don't think individual members can really speak. Even a chair cannot speak for a board. So that is pretty well known. I don't know if that's the basis of that question, but only what the board does together really counts for anything in public boards. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I'd like to open it up to questions from either board.
Yep, I'm going to ask my question the same one I asked Amanda. So if you're an associate member and then someone currently on the board decides not to run, the seat is open, would you consider running for election for the seat?
I would. I think, once you are working in an area you want to progress, whether it's your job or your appointment, I think it's a logical progression to move to a full member once you've had the experience of associate member and working with the board. I disagree with the prior candidate a little bit, and I think there's certainly no negatives associated with moving to the next level when an opportunity opens up. Obviously, you could run for election tomorrow with no experience and get voted in. So I think it's progression. It's typical of any professional role to move in a progressive way, and I think a voting member would be a progression from an associate member.
Okay, great, thank you.
Joe?
Thank you, Trish. Mr. Morgan, I'll ask the same question to you as I did Amanda. Take a lot of time and effort to be part of as an associate member, and as you heard earlier, there's a possibility that someone will have to recuse themselves on a project, and you'll have to be, put into that position, and it's going to take a lot of time and effort. Will you be able to provide that time for the board to do the work that needs to get done?
Sure. I do invest a significant amount of time, as I think most folks know, on town happenings and town doings to stay informed. I attend a lot of meetings, sometimes in person, not as much recently, but I put the time in. I also, generally bring, as I think many of you know, information or case law or positions that are thought out in advance, as opposed to just public comment of my own opinion. And so most of my comments that some are familiar with is based on, my understanding of fact-based and review of documents, et cetera. I'm next to a current planning project. Obviously, I would be recused from the school project. I know we've had discussions on that. So I certainly understand that recusal and what that means and the ethical requirements and so forth that are involved in the position. So I would certainly make the time and would review all projects. And obviously, as an engineer, very familiar with plans and what I'm looking at, right? So not an architect, but I'm an engineer. Yeah.
I guess I'll repeat my question as well. That was the goal. So as you observe the planning board tonight or other meetings, you can see certain gaps or certain expertise that we bring to the table. So what gap, if you will, would you fill for us to make us a better functioning board?
Sure. So I think the discussion tonight was useful, but as an impression of the discussion, and I'll use that as a gap, I felt the board wandered toward the latter half of your discussion. I think that there might have been some attempts to bring the conversation back to conclusion, but I think there was really a need there to stay focused in on the topic at hand. And, that's perhaps something that I might be able to help with here, almost like as a timekeeper, because I'm a non-voting member, is to try and help the conversation move in a positive way. Again, it's a different role than a voting member. But here tonight, I don't know if anyone on the board felt that, but I felt watching this that about halfway through the discussion on the zoning, it started to churn on the same topic, and what seemed like straightforward conclusions were not yet a consensus. And so eventually, I think an hour and a half in, the consensus was reached on a plan, but there could have been some improvement there. That would be the feedback.
Kate, I don't want to miss you being up on the screen there. Do you have anything you wanted to ask or add?
No, I was good with those 3 questions.
Okay. Yeah, I was. I feel like I missed Kate on the last candidate and didn't want to do that again if she wanted to ask something. Okay, so I'll repeat Marcelo's question. The planning board has a very supportive and collegial group, even when the meetings, hearings, and decisions are long, difficult, or filled with challenges and disagreements. How can you contribute or help maintain or improve the current collegial nature of the board?
Well, I think my background in planning and project planning really I think very analytically in terms of putting things together. I think there would be some benefit to some additional detail around agendas or topics as they're being developed, not just because of an open meeting type concern, but just as a way to break stuff down and work through stuff. I know it's been my experience attending meetings that sometimes, you get a couple minutes and then you don't get to talk again. And so I certainly would support an environment that would allow for good focus and moving through a logical path to conclusion, which, I think is everybody's goal. I'm not saying anybody's not doing that. I'm just, when you ask for where it could be improved, I think some of the hearings I've been on have gone late for reasons that might be improved by some upfront planning. So I'm not, again, criticizing the chair. I'm trying to respond to the question. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions from the board? Okay, we'll let you take your seat.
Thank you.
And then, we'll just have general discussion. Making a note to the board that we don't, just a reminder, we do not have to pick a candidate, but if we want to bring someone forward, we can do so. Claudia?
I just wanted to comment. I really appreciated some of the comments that Ms. Hayes made in terms of, I thought when she was talked about clunky, not intuitive matters that she works with, and unfortunately I feel as though the planning board has to deal with those sorts of things all the time. I felt that she talked a lot about building consensus. Again, it is, I think, no offense, but sometimes it's painful to watch what you folks have to do. I really appreciated the comment driving engagement with information. I think engagement in this community is something that you hear over and over again about everybody's efforts to engage the community. We're always looking for ways to do that. And, driving engagement with information. Wow, I just think that it's a great little phrase. And I also really think that the connection to young families in the community could be a benefit.
Other comments?
Sorry,
Claudia.
I just want to say, I do appreciate people stepping forward and volunteering for positions, that involve, certainly, this will involve a great deal of time. And I think that's important. I think, that's also a nice thing about our community is people do step forward.
Other comments?
Well, I'll just, I'll make a comment. Thank you both for coming forward. I think it's great, especially get new people involved. And I think you're both highly qualified. And I think we've got some great candidates to choose from. Steve has, very strong credentials, I think, in this kind of construction related. That's my impression. And, I don't know if that's, is that something that would be especially useful on the planning board? But, they're both very strong candidates, so we're lucky to have them. I did have kind of another kind of, this is a side question. Is your design review committee fairly full, and is there any interest in that, or is it always architects and designers that you're looking for?
It is full at this time. Actually, I think actually we have one associate position open there as well. But the regular members are full.
Yeah. Okay. That's it. Just wanted to ask that. Well,
other comments?
Thank you.
I guess I'll jump in. I'm certainly very familiar with Amanda's application because I heard of her application at the time of the steering committee meeting. I think that each candidate has certain strengths. I keep thinking about kind of the needs of this particular planning board and what we have in front of us, kind of the up and coming challenges, if you will, whether it's the MBTA communities law or our comprehensive plan. There's quite a bit of challenge to both processes that requires a lot of consensus and frankly a lot of cheerleader quality that jumped out at me relative to Amanda's presentation. And I do feel like this planning board would benefit from that because although we are very collegial, we have had moments of tension and frustration within our body, if you will, as a unit. And I think it would be helpful to have that. That being said, some of the things that jumped out at me about Mr. Morgan's application are accountability, execution, really focusing on those elements of implementation and execution. While I don't think the planning board needs that right now, I do wonder if at some point we may want to consider an alternative associate position so that in the event one associate member is not available, because associate members, just like other members, could have, whether it's family obligations or their own recusal. And so I, for one, would be open to considering an alternative associate position. And I do think that Mr. Morgan could be beneficial to the planning board, unique to specific projects, where, for example, we are currently thinking about a tree bylaw, and we are also working on the MBTA issue, and we're working on the comprehensive plan, and I can see someone with Mr. Morgan's project management experience being helpful as an alternative member who perhaps is not present at every single meeting, but we could ask him to essentially consult on specific projects. And I think if we have that jurisdiction as a planning board, we should consider it for specific assignments, if you will. If he's interested, I could see that being a very good role for him. Those are my thoughts.
Anyone else?
I'd just like to say generally, I think that we have two very strong candidates, so I see no reason not to take a vote this evening to select one. I also think I like Anna's idea of potential alternate. I don't believe we're actually allowed like an alternate associate member because we, by state law, can have one associate member. But if there's there certainly is no lack of work on the planning board, and if there's other roles, I would certainly be up for exploring that for the candidate who's not selected.
Yes, as far as I know, there is only, while the Design Review Committee has two alternate members, I think they're called there. We have only one spot for one associate member. So that is what we are able to vote on tonight. I think in terms of my own comments, what I have learned through my time in the planning board and dealing with other boards as well, many different committees as related to the planning board, and sometimes before I was on planning board, is really to be able to, with each member, always kind of trying to ascertain how much I can trust that member, how much they are what they say. If they're the same person in all contexts and don't kind of change personalities in different contexts. Someone who's very transparent in what they're doing on the board, what they're doing outside the board, what they're bringing to the board. If they're bringing everything in an upfront way, if there's ulterior motives, if they're looking to trust the other members of the board and work with them, if they're able to say, I think I'm wrong about this, or I think I might have made a mistake, and in order to take another viewpoint. And those are some of my, beyond even questions of, experience, if you've had experience on this kind of committee before or anything like that, are more important to me about, how I can depend on you, not necessarily agree with you, but how I can depend on you as a person. And so I really appreciated Amanda's answers. I feel like she's very straightforward. I feel like she's very transparent. I have never met her before. I have never talked to her before. But that's the kind of feeling I get from what she's saying, kind of what you see is what you get, and I might make mistakes, putting words in your mouth perhaps. But that's what I'm weighing. And so I guess I would support her candidacy to the associate position.
So in terms of process, typically, correct me if I'm wrong, this is my proposal that and we've done this way in the past, that we open it for nominations. If a person is nominated, we then take a vote. And if my count is right, if that person gets 5 votes, they would then be.
See, you are reading my mind.
Okay, very good.
As the chairs here. So I will open it up to nominations if there's no further comments.
I'll make a motion to appoint Amanda Hayes as an associate member of the planning board for a 3-year term ending August 31st, 2026? June 30th, thank you. All of our appointments are August 31st, so June 30th, 2026.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
And is there any further discussion? All right, in that case, I will take a roll call vote from the planning board, starting with Deepa.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye.
So we'll go, so how many, that's 4 votes right there. Okay, so we'll start with Claudia.
Bennett, aye.
Vignani, aye.
Kinsman, aye.
Greaves, aye.
Sharon, no. So.
All right, so thank you, Mr. Morgan, for your application. Amanda, welcome to the associate position of the planning board.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations, and thank you both for coming.
Thank you both.
And
Thank
Steve
you.
especially. And Steve, I hope we can find something, because you have a lot of energy and knowledge, and I hope we can find something for you to work on here.
So at this time, though we hate to see them depart, the select board.
Motion
And we
to
hate to
adjourn the
leave.
select board.
Well, I didn't ask for it yet.
Trish,
Well, I'll entertain a motion
Amanda to get sworn in.
to let him go.
I'll
All right,
I'll
it was a
second
second.
Yolanda's motion.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, it's been great being here.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, select board.
Yeah,
Can
take
you
your time.
remind Amanda to get sworn in?
Thank you all, and thanks for coming earlier.
Thanks, Peter, for all the information, by the way. It was
Yeah, very nice.
And thank you for volunteering, Claudia.
Good job. We don't know yet. We'll get it done.
I know you don't want me on the committee, but you may be stuck with me.
Yes, so remaining on our agenda, once we get rid of these folks taking up space at our table, is kind of just we do have to go through the 10 to 60 Main Street, and then we'll have various reports and updates and administrative matters, and the always exciting meeting minutes review. Feel free to stay, obviously, but we will not feel, we will not hold it against you if you hang out, or if you decide to go home.
Trish, did you tell Amanda to get sworn in?
Sorry, Kate, did you ask me something?
Yeah, did you tell Amanda to get sworn in?
I think Peter did.
Okay.
So, yes, so, okay, yeah, the scenic roads is just always on there because it's an ongoing thing we're trying to get out to the public. So I guess that's.
I appreciate it. I'll just head out then if you're not going to get to that.
Well, we are going to get to it. Yeah, we are, and fairly shortly, so you might just want to hold on a minute. Because I know you had asked, had a similar concern, I think, at another meeting.
It's come up a few times in the last 5 years.
I haven't been around that long. Are we still,
Yeah, Kate's here.
okay, so we're still good, and we're still on. Okay, so, Peter, I'm gonna let you have the 10 to 60 Main Street, special permit and site plan review.
So yes, so 10 to 60 Main Street, it's been in front of us for over a year now. I know, I'm not gonna go into great depth explaining the history of where we were, obviously, with the project. Obviously, everyone knows.
Amnesia yet.
Exactly.
But I'm starting to think like I do, but yeah.
And so really applicant, I believe, he has filed on August 22nd, 2023, a request from his attorney, Mr. Joe Antonellis, which is in your packet under tab number 2, a request to withdraw the project without prejudice. And so that was filed with the planning office. At our last meeting, that project was continued to this date. As you remember, we have not heard this project since last May. They requested a 60-day continuance, and then again, another 30-day continuance on top of that. So it was before the summertime, since we actually had a open public hearing with this application. And so this request was submitted to me on the 21st of August. Obviously, tonight was the night that project was continued, and so therefore, tonight is why it is showing up on the agenda. Reasons why, I think we can all kind of look at different angles, but at the end of the day, we're not the developer, and so, I don't know if we want to start theorizing about what happened, but I think at the end of the day, the project that was proposed 2 years ago was not financeable. And so I do know that, Mr. Gordon was trying to find a development partner. I think he was unable to do that, and/or he struggled to make and/or to find a development partner. And so therefore, he decided to withdraw the project and/or file withdrawal and look at different opportunities for permitting. And so that is this is what could lie ahead in the future, obviously. They could refile. They could refile as a 40B. Right now, our subsidized housing inventory is around 5.96%. And so that is a possibility. But at this point, I think as the project was designed and it was proposed, using the bylaws, using the ADD district, it did not calculate anymore at the end of the day. And so that has been my major takeaway from the conversations I've had with the application team.
And so obviously, the withdrawal of this application, when we already, even though I would say it was still fairly early in the process, but when we put a lot of work into it, Deepa and I were on a committee even way before it even came to planning board, the working group, but Peter, you were a part of.
I would say it's 4 years,
Yeah.
4 or 5 years in the making.
So,
it is disappointing. I know it's disappointing to many.
Yeah, so it's frustrating, especially when we started to see some good images of coming of that. It was kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back all the time. But it was really kind of a blow when I found out that this was being pulled, because I thought we were making headway. It's such an important site for Ashland, and just hoping that it finds a good pathway for Ashland.
I was just curious, I saw the solar overlay district. We've never used that term before. Why is this appearing now? Or has it always been there, it's just that we never talked about it?
You mean right here,
Yeah.
on the agenda? Like the solar overlay district is the
Yeah.
last point? Yeah, I think that's been there before. That there's an overlay district that covers downtown.
There is. Anna is correct. So there is a solar overlay district. It usually is weaved in with our industrial zoning.
Okay.
And so all of Pleasant Street, along Pleasant Street, that's all zoned with our solar, it's within our overlay solar district.
But it's not a category that, on your chart that you shared some time ago in another context, that's not one of those items or categories in that.
So
list.
on the major zoning map that you would see online through like
Just by
Maps,
default,
GIS, or
they're
People GIS, it's there.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, that district obviously helped create the House Street landfill solar array. That's the cap landfill that the town owned, that we lease out, we developed with, I believe, Amoresco to develop solar. And then also, if you go on Memorial Drive, where Citizens Energy, Joe Kennedy, they developed the solar site that is abutting the Memorial Drive, and then also the area of the cap, the landfill. So that's all solar, 16 acres, but it is within the downtown, within zoning.
So one thing I wanted to say about this project, I'm not going to repeat everything Tricia said because I agree that it was frustrating to do all that work and land where we did. But I'm going to try to kind of imagine some lessons learned at least, and I'll share one for me, which is that viability of a project is not necessarily our expertise as a planning board. It's not necessarily in our jurisdiction to say, ooh, this is viable or this isn't viable. But I do think for me, one of the takeaways is that we need more resources as a planning board to understand what makes a project viable and what data points we need to understand it better, so that there's almost like a language barrier between us and the developer in this project, where there were these points in the conversation that I remember where we would say, well, why can't you do this? He would respond, well, it's not viable. Tell us why. And we couldn't quite get through that. And so for me, that is one of my takeaways, that I, as a planning board member, want to learn more about economic development and viability of what kind of projects are viable right now. So I've started some of that research on my own, kind of learning more about the challenges of commercial real estate right now, what kind of businesses are actually looking to grow. And obviously we have certain zoning challenges because we don't allow certain kinds of things downtown. Those are some of the things I'm taking away from this project, and I hope that we as a planning board can try to make an effort when projects like this come forward that kind of disappear, when we do all this work on them, that maybe we need to more openly talk post-mortem, kind of what did we learn and what can we take away from it.
No.
Yeah, actually,
I think that's a great point.
Yeah, I do too. I think when we have a full board again, I think that might be a great topic of what did we learn? What might we do differently next time as a board? And Kate, make sure you jump in because I keep forgetting you're up there. It just feels like an empty room. So,
Well, along that lines, I do have, I think we need to revisit under our zoning that, that cap on the fee on form-based code, because if this was, 301 Pond withdrew, and we kept a portion of their fee, which was, I recall, somewhere around $21,000 for a much more limited time in front of the town and the planning board. So that means essentially this cost us a lot of money from the town over that year. And I think we all agree on the board, we've talked and we like the idea of an incentive. So I don't think that's a negative, but certainly I think the costs are out of whack. We learned from that. So we probably should revisit that.
And Kate, I for one am not as familiar with that. Can you just like explain it a little bit? You mean that a developer has to put in money, basically?
I can take
Well,
this, Kate.
it's the application fees, right? But there's a waiver that can be granted if the town planner says this meets our form-based code, and then it's sort of a cap on the fees.
Did
So
we grant some kind of waiver, Peter?
There's no waiver. So it's in the bylaw that
Yes.
any application, so it's in the bylaw, there's no waiver. In my eyes, there's no waiver. You know, the application, if the application meets the zoning, you know, and I would say I have the bylaws right behind me, but if the application meets the purpose of the ADDA and or the Ashland Downtown Overlay District, that the application fee is no greater than $4,000. So we put a maximum cap on it to say $4,000 for any project that is using ADD for its permitting avenue. And so I think what Kate, and I agree with Kate, you know, there was a lot of time and effort spent on this project, you know, and so, you know, per se, in comparison, where you have 100 Chestnut Street, right, where they paid, you know, $500 per unit within that application fee, they paid an application fee of thousands of dollars, right? Call it, just to make up numbers here, $30,000, $40,000, wherever it was. But, you know, for this project of its size and its magnitudes of its scale, the town did not collect that large application fee.
Is that because of the way the zoning bylaw is drafted?
There's literally it's one line in the zoning bylaws, and I can point it out at the next meeting, or I can send out a link to the planning board to say this is the line, and I have the bylaws right behind me. I could grab it, but yeah, it caps the application fee at $4,000. Now the applicant is still paying a peer review costs and all those elements, which is through that
Just like the
53G
other
account,
applicant, though.
just like all other applications. But the town, yes, is not benefiting from a one-time large application fee. And that was put in, and to tell you the truth, that was something that, you know, working with Tricia, and I think you both were on the board in 2001 when we
It was before my time.
it was before both of you.
2001, no.
No. Back in 2001, Tricia just got on the,
20.
excuse me, 2020. Oh my gosh, did I say 2001? What was?
We're so
2000.
young suddenly.
Yeah, 21.
In this country at that time.
I was in high school. Excuse me, 21. In 21, when we revisited ADDA, we revisit a lot that deal with mass, flat roofs, setbacks. Those were our main goals, because at that point, you know, there was 21 Main Street. That was the only project. There was 21 Main Street and 128 Main Street were the only two projects that have ever ever utilized ADD zoning. And so with that, when the town, I believe, adopted the new zoning, the ADD zoning, the whole form-based code zoning, which I believe was in like the 2013 realm time period, it just, to motivate development, it capped the application fee of $4,000. I don't know where that number comes from. I can only imagine, but that is the one line in the application.
I think what I'll add to this, like Tricia said, this has been on the boards for such a long time, but what really changed the direction all along is after this new board came along, we ripped layer by layer and went back to basics when we started to look at the design, which not only helped answer a lot of those or concern a lot of the community raised about the existing historic buildings, materiality, the look and feel. I think when this new board came on, we literally started from scratch, which by then that group had already put in 2 years of work, which feels like they've been on this for a long time, but reality is the 2 years changed the course of the project a lot, right? We started from scratch. We went back to the basics. We went to the concepts, and I think it is unfortunate that they have been on it prior to that. I think when we had that subcommittee, they were on it for 2 years. And it was always those renderings that was presented and how the community reacted to it. But when we started on it, we said, let's throw that away and start from scratch, which helped, but it just felt like it was a long process. So I wish we had, I think it's so important as a planning board to have a very clean process so that we take every project that way, irrespective of who is on the board. And we heard tonight, like, we go round and round on topics. It was so crucial to do that because each one of us brings such different viewpoints to the table, and somewhere along the community members connect to those viewpoints, whether it is design that was connected to materiality, historic nature of the downtown or whatever. It is really important to have those conversations, and sometimes it's unfortunate we have to get into the weeds and we have to go round and round about it without saying, don't share more than a sentence. It becomes hard. So we had that couple of times tonight as we seem to go round and round, but that was what the process was all about for 10 and 60 Main.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to defend the planning, but I will say this, and I think going back to when we approved the Chestnut Street project, Roy McDowell sat here, and I think it was Anna that you asked him, like, what was your takeaway, working with the planning board? And he said, yeah, we did go round and round on some topics, but at the end of the day, we came out with a much better project than we started with. You know what I mean? So I think one of those it's a pro and con conversation.
I will say this particular project, it would have been helpful in light of all the effort that everyone invested. I, for one, would have appreciated the applicant being here tonight because I think it would have given us a lot more context for where we are, what they're thinking. I suspect this is not the last time we're going to see this project. And I do think it might be useful for us as a planning board to consider under what circumstances. We certainly can't require people to show up when they have a withdrawal, but maybe we should encourage it because it does have a purpose for the future.
Of course, they're not going to want to be here at 10 o'clock to withdraw the application. But, so why don't we leave I think we're wrapped up anyway on that, but someone want to make that motion? We still have to accept the withdrawal of the application.
I'll make a motion to accept the withdrawal of 10 to 60 Main Street special permanent site plan review application.
And is there a second?
Without prejudice, excuse me.
Thank you. Is there a second? And a roll call vote?
Deepa Venkatai.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye. All right, so going on to topics. Again, this is just where we kind of hit the high points of anything that's happened. So the first one of those is scenic roads, and normally I would say there's probably nothing going on with scenic roads, but I am actually, seeing Mr. Morgan in the audience, I am actually not familiar with what you're talking about with the Sustainability Committee having anything to do with scenic roads.
While Mr. Morgan is walking up to the, can I ask a very quick question? Sure. I want to say and this is in the minutes, I had said, hey, I can help Peter or Alvaro put together a list of the trees on scenic routes that we've cut down or need to replant, and I can't remember what happened with that.
So I can take care of that.
You're doing that?
I can take care of that, not a big deal. Before Mr. Morgan states, I do want to say as an update, we did actually go through, I remember at the last meeting, I said there's going to be a lot of overwork with, to go through, that whole long list. I think it was 500 abutters on all those roads.
Yep.
About if there's any condo associations.
Yes.
So Alvar and I went back through, we're scrubbing everything. That list did not include any of the condos, right?
Oh, okay.
And so we are going to send it out to about 500 people.
Wow.
We
Okay.
ordered all the postcards, and we're also going to contact the condo associations. But, so that is in the process, and
Okay.
Anna was correct. We did finalize and formalize that postcard. And so we should be able to kind of
Okay.
roll through that.
So it's just actually people who are actually on the road, not
Not
condos. where they're-
condos.
Correct, correct. And so, you know, there was town-owned properties on it, so Alvaro's going through, we're scrubbing that list. We don't want to send it out to more people than we already have,
Yeah.
or send it back to ourselves. So that is happening, and still kind of moving forward.
Thank
Excuse me, Mr. Morgan, microphone's yours.
All right, well, I didn't have a lot to say, but since the question was asked, the Sustainability Committee was about 6 months behind on the minutes, so it's not surprising that you didn't see their minutes. I did have an open meeting law complaint that got resolved that caused them to post all their overdue minutes. I hope that was seen as positive. So there are minutes there now that you could look at, but they apparently have an ongoing topic in their form and sustainability where they expect to bring a new tree bylaw to the town meeting. Now, I don't know why they would be involved in the scenic road and the tree bylaw, which is why I'm concerned, because I don't see that as a sustainability scope, but they're working on a bylaw. And I think they need to come here perhaps to talk to the planning board and explain what they're doing.
So
because
they
I think
did
it's your
come to
jurisdiction.
us.
Yeah.
So they did
Yeah.
come to us to tell us about their tree bylaw. I think I chaired that meeting. I think Tricia was out. But what I can tell you is we did not discuss scenic routes specifically. The tree bylaw would apply to the entire town of Ashland. So perhaps you're referencing some kind of distinction on their agenda, which I haven't seen. But just so you're clear, they've been very transparent with us, and we are working together with them. They've been working on a tree bylaw for many years.
So the problem, right, so the problem I've had
Yeah.
on Concord Street is people taking down trees that shouldn't be taken down. Questions of interpretation, whether tree growth over the road counts as tree growth, which it clearly does. This has come up in this form, I think, probably in the last 8 years, 4 or 5 times. There's also an issue with the utility company coming over and doing tree cutting without coordinating with this board. And so these are ongoing things that happen in the tree bylaw where people have taken down trees, not had to replace them. I think the work you're doing to try and come up with a process to restore trees, and I don't think, again, you take a tree, you need to repair a tree. I think that concept makes sense to me. I'm just not sure what the strategy is. And so when I saw it on the agenda, reviewing it for tonight.
Totally two different things.
Okay.
The sustainability folks are drafting a tree bylaw that, with our input, so that if they present it to town meeting, the planning board properly, because zoning is within our jurisdiction, probably gives them feedback. On the scenic roads tree thing, I think this board has discussed a few times the importance of starting kind of a log, if you will, of trees that we take down and starting to brainstorm how to replant them. I think you're referencing kind of a general concern that, hey, are you guys even aware of what's being taken down? And that's something we can
So I know that
discuss.
you have joint jurisdiction with conservation on certain trees where it overlaps with scenic roads. We've had that issue also come up. And I'm just interested, if you've got a document, maybe someone could share with me what your drafts are going to look like or what you've agreed to with sustainability. I would be interested to know what.
We don't have any kind of draft at this
You
point.
haven't
This
moved
is-
anything
This is
yet.
a
Okay.
discussion.
Okay.
They
All right.
are drafting a tree bylaw, where it's not had any public forums or anything yet.
Is that to
This-
allow cutting trees or to plant trees? I guess I don't even know what they're up to because
Well,
the
I
minutes are
think
so
you can go
vague.
back and watch
Yeah.
the tape of the last meeting.
Yeah.
I was going to
I'll
say,
do that.
watch the
Yeah.
tape.
Yeah, I'll do
It
that.
has a
Thank you.
lot of information, but the purpose of it, like in other communities that have a tree bylaw, is to define as a developer, whether private or public development, that's a topic for discussion and debate at town meeting, whether there's certain limitations to how you clear cut and what you have to replant. That's like big
I
picture.
think that,
Deepa-
I think that's great, and I think that does apply to things like the school project near my home, where they failed to plant trees that were in the design, didn't perhaps plant all the trees that would have been required and received a waiver from this board. So I think those are all very useful discussions, and I would look forward to seeing that, so thank
It's
you.
also like from the net zero point of view, right? So how, there is that metrics that you have, so much carbon dioxide, that ratio that you have. So as the
Sure.
committee is working on that, so this is an important component. Clear cutting is one part of it, which probably is the major one for Ashland, that definitely look at that video. We've had
I'll
quite
go
a
back,
bit of
I'll go back and look
conversation
at it,
on
I might have missed it,
but I
so
think
thank you.
sustainability's input is also from that net zero, the final goal that they are getting as a committee. I think that's a huge, important part of that process. that
Great,
they're working
you
on.
say it was the last meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
I do want to kind of comment on something you said, which is you made a comment about a school project and a waiver. That's not currently in our agenda. And so
understood.
I don't think we can
Just-
comment on it.
Just mentioning the trees.
But
that
I
we're not
don't necessarily want
including.
to,
Yeah.
by not commenting, agree to your,
100%,
to your
thank you.
explanation.
Yeah. Again, I'm just
Until it's on the agenda, we can't really
not
comment
trying
on
to
that
cause a
project.
violation. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so that's scenic roads, and so we got both an update on that, and, okay, economic, so economic impact tool is,
I don't have an update on that, nor the parking memo. Alvaro put out a parking memo, we're still kind of working on it.
Yeah.
I know we talked about size, compact spaces, size. Right now, we define parking spaces 20 by 10.
comprehensive.
Elaborate that
sorry.
parking memo to say what exactly we're talking about.
I-
What is parking memo? Because
I-
we're talking about the size of.
Yes, so a couple things. I think Marcelo brought it up a couple months ago, start talking about, okay.
Can we just make that, add that extra word to that sentence?
Sure, it's
saying,
parking memo. I would
the
say,
size of a parking or whatever.
yeah,
age or
right
something.
now,
It's to explain the parking.
Yeah.
just to explain parking, yep.
So we'll get it's been on the thing for a while now, but hopefully we'll be able to tackle it this fall.
Yeah.
Do you guys need more time on comprehensive plan?
Kate, do you want to update?
The biggest update, I'm just going to keep being a cheerleader. The first meeting with the consultant is September 21st, and I think it would be nice to have a lot of community participation to kind of basically welcome. I want people, to kind of see how their money's being used, and I think that would be a great way to kick it off. So just to publicize that, I don't.
And
think
come
there's-
join. It's a great
Yes.
opportunity for the planning board to be there as well. The whole board is invited. Meeting the consultant is a big deal, and hopefully you can come, even for a few
When
minutes.
is this?
A week from today,
Thursday,
right?
September 21st. We can get your details, but, you may not have multiple hours of your time, but you can come by, shake the hand of the consultant.
I'm hosting my first, this one as a precedent. But my question to you is, now having Amanda on board, now we have 3 planning board members on comprehensive committee.
No,
Is
Amanda's
that
not.
gonna
She was
be-
not. Amanda had applied for a precinct seat, but she was not chosen for the precinct seat. So she's not on the steering committee. She can certainly participate in anything relating to the comprehensive plan. And there has been some effort to try to find a way to engage applicants who were not chosen to participate. So Amanda may choose to be part of that, but she's not formally on the steering committee.
Okay,
But
so.
she should come next week.
Sorry. All right, so, design review committee has 9 to 49 gone?
Nope.
Okay, so nothing there. Sustainability committee, you met with them 2 weeks ago. But-
Here,
yeah.
yes, we had a planning board, well, was it virtual? Yeah, virtually.
Yeah, virtually, that's right.
It was in person.
Was it?
Yep.
Wow. Okay, yes, it was.
It was in person.
No, it
No,
wasn't.
it was the
No,
one
it was a virtual
virtually.
meeting.
Right, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For a minute,
it was
I'm like,
virtual.
what?
It was virtual.
No, it was definitely like
It
one
was
of those things
virtual.
where we were all little heads on a computer screen.
That's right.
Yes.
See, we
did-
need help.
I have a quick question about that. I think we left that meeting saying we would like to have sort of regular,
Yes.
short-ish, discrete topics to keep this going. Has anyone heard anything about that, or is anyone going to reach out?
I have, Kate.
okay.
So I had a follow-up meeting the week following the virtual meeting on Zoom with Margie, Sustainability Manager Samantha Riley, and Chuck. And we talked about the sustainability's want for a tree bylaw. I reviewed, and it was actually it was good for me. I reviewed 4 other communities' bylaws, and we kind of discussed options and the direction of the bylaw. And I talked to Margie about a presentation about tackling a couple points of emphasis and or a couple points that she would like to drive some census on or can get to some census, including size of a tree what projects the tree bylaw would pertain to, kind of the direction, the purpose of a tree bylaw. So they do plan to come back on our next meeting, which would be the 28th. And right now, the only project on that would be 9 to 49 Homer Street.
So I would suggest, as long as Amanda's sworn in by then, that might be a great potential project for the associate member to help on as well, because I think that's going to be a very involved item. And I'm just throwing out there that might be good to consider as a involvement for our associate member, but potentially, if there's interest.
Yes, I was going to say, we don't want to volunteer anyone to things that they might not be interested.
While she's excited, let's grab her and before she knows what's really
Beware.
going on. Whose side are you on, Tricia?
I don't know.
Come on.
Like I said.
Don't tell her how hard it is.
Wait, don't make her
She
run
might
away
leave.
before she
Yeah,
does.
what are you doing? It's exciting. Trees, bylaw.
All right, next item on the agenda is CPC, and actually, so on the CPC, after several months of kind of discussion, well, the select board had come to the CPC and asked if the CPC would take over the task of trying to figure out what is going on with certain properties around Ashland, which include Corner Spot, which include the farmer's market, include some other things, where money has been given, property has been bought, but there's no conservation restriction, or the properties are being used for different purposes than they were originally intended for, which creates a little bit of a logistic mess, right? So on that, so the CPC agreed to start taking on those things, knowing that the town hall is the town staff is obviously way over obligated at this time with all the projects going around town. So Peter and I had a meeting just this past week with Lisa Mead to talk specifically about the farmers market and the Corner Spot sites. And we'll be kind of creating a memo about that at some point, partly just to solidify my own understanding of the very detailed information that Lisa Mead had on these projects. It is complicated, but I'll be reporting back on that and just letting you know what's going on.
Is there a way we could remind ourselves through your efforts, since you're talking to Lisa, how we can use CPC funds for affordable housing? I remember we opened up that door and we kind of got a high-level presentation.
Yes.
And that was especially fascinating, to me at least.
Yeah.
And
so,
if you're talking to Lisa Mead already, if we can get some more clarification as how CPC can be used for that, it might educate us on other projects.
yeah, so that the two properties that I'm talking about, some money was given to the CPC to the organizations to buy land.
Mm-hmm.
But that's different than what we
affordable
were talking
okay.
about, like, hey, can we pay for 10% more units? But yes, Lisa has a very good in-depth understanding of that as well, and maybe she can help to
What I'm
spell it
saying
out
is,
for us sometime.
obviously, Lisa's time is also money, right? And so
Yep.
it's a matter of like resource, if she's giving us an hour of her time or whatever, and there's space for that discussion,
I think-
maybe adding that if we have her.
I think it's an educational component that might be, yeah, and might be also an invitation of the CPC to join us as well, so that we're all on the same
Yeah,
page. when
this
these
isn't,
opp-
I was just blown away that it's even a possibility,
Yep.
and it's a source, it's a tool in our tool set that seems really exciting.
It's a really big tool.
And there's money sitting there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
How cool would that be?
But there's a lot of component, as Tricia understands, or obviously kind of got first-hand knowledge, sitting with Lisa, and, excuse me, it's, I don't want to say it's easier said than done, but there's a lot of components and elements one has to take into account when using CPA funds for affordable housing.
I'm just envisioning that if there's consensus in our community with the select board and others that we're going to do that, that could be really exciting as a way to like push development to be curious about
Yeah,
us.
Agreed. I mean, that's why I was so excited the first time I asked Aaron Ladd, the committee chair, about it, and he said, yes, you can do that. I'm like, oh, okay. Okay, so, so that ends that. Any other reports that aren't on this list that anyone has? Okay, then, any updates, any significant updates that we need to know?
No, The only one was Whitmore Estates. I think I talked to everybody about that. I'm still trying to find out more information about litigation, what the suit is. And
I don't
how-
recall it ever being served. Did we get served somehow?
No, Lisa got served. It was really
Okay.
came through the town, so I think, being, I was never served. This is the first time I've been named in the suit, so the planning board members, myself, and the town are named in the suit. So everything right now is with the town manager's office. Lisa Mead was the one that kind of received it. It's been pushed off to our insurance company, Maya. They're taking a look at it. Lisa Mead has it. Our Conservation Commission has issued fines. There's a court hearing on that. And so this is being looked at and taken care of by our legal team. And so.
At some point, we'll have an executive session.
At
to
some point, I'll
update.
talk to Lisa and I'll
Okay.
ask her what makes sense, and go from there. Regarding any of these projects, I really have a huge update on any of them. 100 Chestnut Street continues to be developed, construction continues to happen out there. I do want to make note that we did receive one new application for a cell phone tower, at 400 Cedar Street, which is our, water tower. And that is with T-Mobile, and that will be on our first meeting in October. It's a quick,
Don't we have a few Verizon ones up there? Are they gonna start like falling on top of each other?
so T-Mobile, 20 years ago, the town permitted T-Mobile to be on top of the roof. It's always been a concern because you're putting weight on top of that water tower. So after years of back and forth with DPW director, that we want to remove that equipment. So after a 20-year lease expired, we did not renew a lease for them. But recently, there was 4 carriers around the sides of the tank, right? One on top. T-Mobile was on top. So 2 of the 4 carriers that were on the side merged, and then one carrier removed their equipment, which opened up a spot on the side of the tank. So the town waited to let that T-Mobile term fall or just expire, lapse. Then we issued RFP for the spot open on the side of the tank. So now T-Mobile is gonna come off the tank and go on the side of the tank. But in doing so, they're gonna upgrade it with 5G capable equipment.
Right, and then, were you done?
Mom, done, yep.
I just wanted to make one note in this category that I'm going to start putting together just a little thing in the town manager's newsletter, maybe once a month from planning board, updating them on what we're doing. So, just what's before the board, maybe noting things are under construction, not repeating any information that's in there. So I just wanted to give a little heads up about that.
Thank
So,
you.
okay. Probably the first one would be not tomorrow, but next Friday. Okay, so I guess next meeting is September 28th, and then we just have meeting minutes.
What's going on with the Starbucks mural?
Beth Reynolds is working on that with the Ashland Cultural Council, and so that is happening.
Okay.
And hopefully construction is ongoing out at Starbucks, so I was in communication with the contractors today and moving along.
Great.
Coffee will be poured hopefully sooner rather than later.
I'm going a form that gives 3 words about, this is gonna inform the mural, I did it the other night, about a word to describe Ashland's past, a word to describe Ashland's present, and a word to describe Ashland's future.
This was for what?
And
For the,
it's part of the mural.
Oh,
to
cool.
inform the proposals for the mural.
Neat. That's exciting. That's awesome. That's great news.
I was scrolling last night, through my 3 words.
Sweet. Good to know.
I have, do you have the meeting minutes?
Yes.
Peter? Oh, they're in.
June 29th, July 13th. Yep, these should be.
Well,
in there.
I made my highlights in yellow, but I don't remember what I'm changing. So we're looking at the June 29th, right? So
Yeah.
I'm looking at line 29.
2-4 to 2.
Oh, yeah. So
Yeah, I think
it
your
just-
notes are good. Yeah, the ones I have in here don't have your change. I like your change.
Well, yeah, so
Yeah.
So he
Could
doesn't
you
have
bring it up? I'm sure it's fine, but I guess.
Actually, my
I'd
changes
like-
are not a part of the original document, but we can bring up, if you want to
Yeah,
bring
we
up
can
the
bring 'em
meeting
up.
minutes. I just highlighted them myself, but I didn't.
Yeah. Hold on, Kate.
So this would just be line 29, something about it just doesn't read right.
Yeah, it floats.
And so my correction was, he endorsed the suggestion to have the select and planning boards meet to ascertain the status of the Upper Charles Trail project. Because I'm not sure what it was really trying to say.
Sounds like a reasonable change.
And I think, oh, I had a couple more.
It was this line right here, Kate.
Yep, no, I heard that. That's good. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, so I just changed it to ascertain
To ascertain
the status of the Upper Charles Trail project. Yeah. And then jump in anyone if you have changes before me, but on 207, Kevin Mowatt's name is just spelled wrong. 207, yeah.
And on line 118 and 119, where we are voting, there's like no discussion in between the votes, I'm not sure why.
What number?
118, end of 118, after Kate's seconded, there's like no discussion. And then
Oh.
the rest of the,
Like you're saying that no discussion doesn't need to be there? Like we didn't really discuss it, we just
I mean, when we-
seconded.
yeah, when we
And
voted,
voted.
I'm not sure.
Sometimes you can have some discussion, but maybe that doesn't belong there, Peter. Can we get rid of no discussion?
Yeah, it's almost like a different person maybe was doing the notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't usually have that in there.
Yeah, let's get rid of
I,
that.
I think a lot of time, I think
Where is
it is
Page 3, I think?
118, taking out this, no
Oh,
discussion.
yeah.
Yeah, because I think typically after someone makes a motion, you do allow time to discuss, but usually, well, I'll say always, we have already so thoroughly discussed the topic, we just kind of do that when we're ready to vote.
Actually, it happens on 130, so I don't know if this is a new format that line 130 also has
Yeah, I
this.
see it, I got it, I got 130, I took it out. Where was Kevin Mowat?
130, 148,
Those are other instances in it, of it?
yeah.
Yeah, I got it. I can go back, we can go through it tomorrow.
All right, should I make a motion? I'll make a motion
Oh.
to, oh, you got more?
207.
207.
M-O-W-A-T-T. Yeah. Okay. Now
So
I'm
I'll
good.
make a motion to accept the June 29th, 2023 minutes with the changes discussed.
And a second,
Second that,
roll call vote,
Deepa Venkatai.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
and Tricia Kendall, aye. All right, so moving on to July 13th. I have on line 30, Ujwala Panikar's last name is misspelled from Design Review Committee. Oh, that might be that's my only edit.
My version doesn't have numbers, so I don't know what line this is. But page 3, where it says, Mr. Matchuk reported that Ms. Tesmanitsky volunteered to complete a list of trees. Only because I'm not doing it, can we put in if needed, volunteered if needed to complete a list
What
of
line is
trees?
that?
No idea. There's no lines on mine.
All right, so first go to line 30.
Yeah.
Let's correct that name spelling.
P-A-W-N-A.
Oh.
Did you join that
You
meeting
might have,
late?
you might have corrected
Anna?
it already, yeah.
Because you were absent in this meeting.
Oh, interesting. I was definitely not absent because, really?
So what did
I
you
was
join
definitely involved.
late?
You were absent up at the top. I'll go back and check that.
I'm pretty sure I was there. I
know
don't
you
think,
were there, Yeah. I'll go back and double check.
Was there a meeting? I'm trying to think. I think when I was in Israel, I may have missed
There
one.
was a meeting that you missed, you were in
So-
Israel right after. Well,
so
you didn't miss this one.
If I missed this one, then I definitely wasn't volunteering for anything. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So let's make sure I was actually there.
I'll double.
But I do remember some kind of conversation where I was like, oh, I'll do this. So I don't honestly know.
Mr. Matthew reported that Ms. Tisdale was volunteered to complete.
If needed, to complete a list of.
Oh, I reported that Ms. Tisdale was.
Oh, so then I wasn't there.
reported it. You
That's
weren't
fine.
there. Volunteered to complete.
Got
the
it.
list of the- If needed.
Understood. So then we're good to go.
Okay, with size,
I was
specimen,
absent.
okay,
You're right.
location. Okay,
Yeah, that might have been an email that you
Yeah.
had sent. and-
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
that's
So,
fine.
Peter, even this one has no discussion happening as well?
Okay, I'll go back and
So-
take that out. I think
yeah.
that's just a new format. Say,
Okay.
Linda Kane did these as well, who does a great job.
Otherwise, I'm good.
I'll make a motion to accept the July 13th. Well, I wasn't even there. Can I do that? I guess I can.
I'll make the motion
Yep.
to accept the July 13th meeting minutes as amended.
Second that,
And a roll call vote?
Deepa Venkatai.
I think I'm allowed to
It's you,
vote.
Kate,
Yeah, or whatever. I'm not
Catherine
gonna-
Jersey, aye.
and Tricia Kendall, I. Probably if you,
I'll
probably
just
if you listen
abstain.
to them, but
I haven't.
yeah,
I trust you.
it was very exciting.
I felt like you guys handled it fine based on the minutes. Other than volunteering me for something
All right,
that I
so-
didn't do.
That's what I do best.
Anything else, folks, that we need to say before we adjourn?
I will make a motion to adjourn.
All right, motion to adjourn at 10:28. Is there a second?
Second,
And a roll call vote?
Deepa Venkatai.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye.